Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, True Scary Stories. Where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it in your country? Have you shared my channel with your friends yet, or are you keeping these whispers all to yourself? You're watching this, aren't you? Nestled under your duvet, perhaps a little too close to midnight, your window a vast black canvas reflecting the small, scared light of your screen back at you. That's a lovely picture. You've probably tried to convince yourself that the creak in the hallway is just the house settling, or maybe the cat. But the cat hasn't been seen since you moved out here. It's always the setting that gets you first, the cabin you chose for its total, beautiful isolation, surrounded by nothing but the towering, sighing pines. You know the kind of isolation that's so complete. Your ears actually start to strain, trying to find a sound that isn't the frantic pulse in your own neck. You bought this silence, and now you own it, every unnerving decibel of it. It's the kind of place where if you were to drop dead right now, they wouldn't find you for weeks, and the mail carrier would probably just leave a note that says, "Sorry we missed you, try not to die next time." So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and the local time in the comments. We're all alone together, aren't we? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that low, unsettling hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a creature of habit, which is why you picked this tiny two-room cabin tucked miles off the nearest gravel road, a safe, predictable existence. You unpack your small essentials, a few books, enough coffee to sustain a medium-sized city, and the one piece of decor that matters, the old solid oak door that separates you from the wilderness. It's a door that feels as old as the earth around it, heavy and reassuring, bolted from the inside with a thick steel slide. It offers a promise of security, which, of course, is the biggest lie any horror story tells. You run your hand over the cold wood grain. It's just after 9 p.m. The wind outside is a soft, continuous moan, like the world is bored but trying to stay awake for something important. The thing about being truly alone is that your mind becomes the loudest thing in the room. You start cataloging sounds. The tiny tink of the cooling stovepipe, the almost silent settle of the foundation, the low-frequency thrumming that may or may not be your own blood pressure. You try to tell yourself a story to keep your brain occupied, maybe a cozy mystery, but your thoughts keep circling back to the sheer emptiness beyond the pane of glass you call a window. You've heard the mainstream scary fact about isolation. It's a documented phenomenon that prolonged sensory deprivation can induce hallucinations and paranoia, often causing subjects to hear voices or phantom noises. Researchers disagree on whether these experiences are purely neurological misfires due to a starved brain, or if the mind becomes hyper-attuned to real but previously ignored environmental sounds. You, however, are perfectly sane. You just chose a spot where the local wildlife consists entirely of things with too many legs and too much silence. You start to get tired around 11,000 BPM, a pleasant, heavy fatigue. You pulled the thick blanket up, savoring the cool, clean scent of the sheets. This is the payoff, you think, the profound peace. You close your eyes, the last thought drifting through your head being a darkly humorous one. I'm so antisocial, I'd throw a party just to cancel it. You smile a little into the pillow. And then it happens. It's exactly midnight. The silence doesn't shatter. It cracks open, just enough to let the sound through. It's not loud. It's just profoundly clear. Knock, knock, pause, knock. 3 distinct raps on the front door. You freeze. Your eyes snap open. Your heartbeat does a quick, professional double-time rhythm, the one reserved for imminent peril. You know that knock. You know the exact tempo, the weight behind the 3rd rap. It's the specific rhythm you developed years ago when you had roommates and needed a way to let them know it was you, not a random caller, saving them the effort of asking, "Who is it?" You've been using that same knock-knock pause, knock for almost a decade. It's yours. It's your signature. You lie still, trying to be a rational adult, thinking it's a branch, it's the wind shifting a loose piece of wood, it's a deer, but the rhythm was too precise, too human. You even try to replicate it silently on the mattress with your fingertips, and the memory of the sound is chillingly identical. You remember the obscure lore about the echo knock in some Appalachian traditions, a superstition that says if you hear a precise, familiar sound, especially a knock that only you would recognize, it isn't a person, but an omen. They say it's your own life force testing the barrier. A warning that something is trying to learn your habits before it tries to take your place. A darkly witty part of your mind whispers, "Well, at least I know the intruder has good manners and respects a consistent pattern." You lie there, heart drumming, the silence outside having been replaced by a dense, suffocating awareness. You wait, listening for footsteps, a cough, a whisper, anything that might signify a lost hiker or a late-night delivery driver who has missed the last 30 turns. Nothing. Just the wind, which now sounds less bored and more patiently expectant. You finally sit up, pulling the blanket around you, shivering not from cold, but from the sudden, profound knowledge that you are no longer the only person who knows your signature knock. Allo Abi, and whoever delivered it is still out there waiting for you to make a move. You spend the next 3 hours sitting upright, watching the clock tick, convinced that the moment you relax, the moment you close your eyes, the second, more insistent set of knocks will arrive. They don't. At 3 a.m., exhausted and defeated by the sheer lack of further action, you finally lay back down, pulling the covers higher, but you don't sleep. You simply rest with your eyes closed, waiting for the sun to burn away the night's awful clarity. The sun does rise, of course. It's a beautifully ordinary morning, one that tries its best to make the previous night's terror seem like a feverish dream. The light streams through the window, warm and unapologetic, illuminating dust motes dancing in the airproof of a simple, material world. You walk to the door, the heavy oak that seemed so menacing hours ago, and slide the steel bolt back with a reassuring thunk. You open it, peering out. There's nothing. No footprints in the dew-damp earth, no broken branches, no sign that anyone or anything has approached the small, weathered porch. The forest floor is untouched, a carpet of pine needles and damp moss stretching into the endless woods. You convince yourself, with the harsh rationality of daylight, that it must have been a branch. The wind, a settling pipe, something pedestrian and boring. You dismiss the perfect rhythm of the knock, filing it away under stress-induced auditory hallucination. A darkly witty part of your mind whispers, "If I'd known isolation was this stressful, I would have at least stocked up on more anxiety-inducing snacks." You spend the day deliberately focused on mundane tasks, reading a book, grinding the coffee beans, taking a long walk deeper into the woods, just to prove you aren't afraid. You notice a detail about your cabin that suddenly feels significant. The latch on the woodshed door is missing. A small, irrelevant thing, but you remember seeing it 2 days ago. Now it's just gone. Not broken off, but removed. You chalk it up to a dry rot or rust and carry on. You feel better, much better. The memory of the knock begins to fade into the general background noise of your cabin life. You even manage a good, solid meal, a meal you prepare in the small, cramped kitchen. The sound of the sizzling oil and chopping knife, a comforting antithesis to the silent menace of the night. You practically laughing at your own foolishness. Historians still argue whether the earliest documented cases of alleged poltergeist activity were genuine supernatural occurrences or simply misunderstood localized instances of structural degradation and high atmospheric pressure causing random noises. You lean heavily on the misunderstood side of that debate. As evening approaches, however, the daylight's confidence begins to bleed away. The shadows stretch long and thin like fingers across the floorboards. The wind picks up, making the glass in the window rattle, a sound that is too random, too frantic to be comforting. You try to immerse yourself in your book, but the words blur. Every time the wind throws a loose pine cone against the exterior wall, you flinch. You're waiting. You know you are. You climb into bed an hour earlier than usual, partly out of exhaustion and partly because you want the whole dreadful waiting game to be over with. You leave the small bedside lamp on, just a low, warm glow. You check the door bolt again, a slow, careful inspection. It's solid, unmoving. You close your eyes, attempting to achieve that state of rest with eyes closed again. The clock on the small table is loud, ticking with an absurd, relentless certainty. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It's a sound that seems to accelerate as the minutes move toward the inevitable hour. You remember the old, bizarre superstition that if you're being stalked by a doppelganger, a common though obscure horror tidbit found in Germanic folklore, they are utterly powerless to act until the precise moment of a solar or lunar apex, which includes the apex of the night, midnight. They must wait for the peak of darkness to achieve their imitation. You scoff internally. The intruder has to wait for a precise cosmic alignment. What a demanding schedule. The air in the room feels heavy now, almost viscous. You can't pinpoint a smell. but the atmosphere has changed. It's the difference between being alone and being observed. And then the chime of the antique clock downstairs announces the hour. 12 chimes. Ding, ding, ding. On the final, lingering reverberation of the 12th chime, it happens again. Knock, knock, pause. 3 distinct, precise raps on the front door. The exact same signature. The same weighted pressure on the third knock. If anything, it's clearer tonight. More confident. It's an audible echo of your own habit. A mocking invitation. You don't sit up this time. You simply lie there, rigid, breath hitched high in your chest. A slow, chilling realization starts to crawl up your spine. A branch wouldn't hit the same spot twice with the same precision on 2 different nights. A deer wouldn't use a rhythmic pattern. A human is capable of it, but what human knows your secret decade-old knot pattern? You almost laugh, a terrible dry sound caught in your throat. Knock, knock, who's there? You are. You're you. That's the punchline. This time, the knock is an accusation. It proves the first time wasn't a mistake. It proves a thing or a person is outside, paying meticulous attention to you. It proves that whatever is there knows something deeply, intimately personal about the pattern of your life. You think of the mainstream scary fact of the Zodiac killer, whose cryptic letters to the police and newspapers proved he was observing his victims, and the subsequent police reaction with a cold, almost academic detachment. This feels like that, a cold, detached study of your habits. The sound seems to linger in the air, a physical pressure. You squeeze your eyes shut. You breathe through your nose slowly. You focus on the bolt on the door, willing it to hold. You spend the rest of the night waiting for the pattern to change, to hear the door handle rattle or the wood splinter. But it remains silent. That's the most terrifying part. It knocked, and now it waits, knowing you heard it. It's playing a game, and the rules are, I know you're in there, and I know your sign. You fall into a shallow, fitful sleep just before dawn, dreaming not of the woods, but of a long, dark hallway with a door at the end, and a hand raising itself slowly to knock. You wake up feeling like you haven't slept in a week. The sunlight is back, a liar's comfort. The moment you are fully conscious, the realization of last night hits you like a cold wave. It wasn't an accident, it was an appointment. You are now in the active state of paranoia. You don't just walk through the cabin, you sweep through it. You check every window latch. You test the door bolt again, listening for the reassuring click of solid metal. You even check the chimney flue, which is probably ridiculous, but the mind demands comprehensive security theater when faced with an invisible, rhythmic foe. You drink 3 cups of coffee, trying to sharpen your mind enough to form a plan. What do you do when the world's most polite stalker announces their presence by perfectly replicating your own knock? You could call the police, but what would you say? Officer, a thing outside my remote cabin keeps knocking on my door in a pattern I created. You'd be institutionalized for your own safety, which is frankly a far more boring horror story. You decide the only defense is analysis. You walk over to the front door, putting your ear against the cold wood, the same spot the sound came from. You push your hand outward, measuring the distance to the porch railing. It's a very specific angle of approach. You find a small, almost imperceptible scratch near the keyhole. You think it's new, a tiny gouge that wasn't there yesterday. The realization hits you. This isn't a random person. This is a calculated, deliberate trespass onto your identity. They didn't just hear you knock once, they studied you. You think about the obscure tidbit of folklore concerning the Knuckleavee, a demonic horse-like creature from Arcadian myth. Unlike most monsters, the Knuckleavee isn't drawn by malice or bloodlust, but by a consuming desire for recognition. Its motivation is to force the human world to acknowledge its grotesque existence, to insert itself into their reality. Your own situation feels similar. This entity wants you to know it knows you. You try to distract yourself by thinking of darkly humorous ways to deal with the situation. Maybe I should put a sign on the door that says, "We've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty, but it's late, so please come back tomorrow." Or I should only open the door wearing a perfectly identical rubber mask of its face. That should make things awkward. The forced humor is thin, brittle. The afternoon drags on, marked by nervous glances at the clock. The fear isn't about the knock. The fear is about what comes after the knock. What does the entity want? It's an old, mainstream, scary fact that the most terrifying criminals are often those who seek control and psychological manipulation over physical harm. Think of the BTK killer who derived pleasure not just from the act, but from the cat and mouse game with law enforcement controlling the narrative. Your visitor is controlling your sleep, your movements, and your peace of mind with 3 simple taps. As the sun sets, you begin the ritual of fear again. You pull all the curtains shut. You turn on every light in the cabin. The soft amber glow of the lamps feels weak against the vast, impenetrable blackness pressing against the windows. You decide you will not go to bed. You will sit in the kitchen, alert, armed with a heavy cast-iron skillet, ready to meet the knocker, not with fear, but with an extremely uncomfortable conversation about boundaries. You watch the clock move. 11,045 p.m., 11,005 p.m., 11,055 p.m. The silence inside is deafening because you are forcing yourself not to make a sound. You are the perfect prey, quiet, cornered, and waiting. The clock begins to strike. 11, 12, ding. The final chime dies. And then the sequence repeats. Knock, knock, pause, knock. It's louder this time. More resonant. It feels less like a signal and more like a declaration. It's the sound of solid wood meeting a determined hand. You leap up, adrenaline surging, skillet gripped tightly. You stalk toward the door, your heart pounding a frantic counter-rhythm to the silence that has once again fallen outside. You stop inches from the oak. You realize you are breathing too loud. You press your ear to the wood. Nothing. Then, slowly, deliberately, you tap back. Your own knock. Knock. Pause. Knock. You were acknowledging the game. You were saying, I know you know. Now what? You wait a full minute, 2, and then, from the other side, not a knock, but a sound that makes your blood run truly cold. A low, soft, drawn-out sigh. A breath of pure, patient relief. As if the entity was waiting for you to simply acknowledge its existence, and it sounds exactly, perfectly like your own sigh. You back away from the door, stumbling backward until you hit the kitchen counter. It's a moment of shattering clarity. This isn't just an imitator of sound. This is an imitator of you. You stare at the door, the skillet slipping from your numb fingers to clatter harmlessly on the linoleum. You realize with a sickening jolt that if you would open that door, you wouldn't find a stranger, but a mirror. A perfect, terrifying reflection of your own calculating, solitary self. The sound of your own sigh on the other side of the door hangs in the air, a poisonous vapor. It's not just the sound itself, but the implication. It means the entity hasn't just been observing your habits from a distance. It has been close enough to hear the nuances of your breathing, the involuntary expressions of your weariness and tension. It's inside your skin, metaphorically speaking, but you're beginning to worry it's also literally speaking. You stay in the kitchen, staring at the floor, unable to move, unable to process. The paranoia has deepened into a cold, clinical horror. You realize that your predictable life, the very thing you sought out here, has made you an easy mark. Your routine is its script, your face, its costume. You finally force yourself to move, driven by a terrible curiosity. You creep toward the living room window, the one that faces the front door. The glass is thick, and the temperature drop outside has coated the exterior in a thin, fragile layer of frost. You know you shouldn't look, that seeing it will only confirm the worst, but you have to. You pull the edge of the curtain back just a fraction of an inch, pressing one eye to the gap. The light from inside the cabin spills out faintly, illuminating the porch. The shadow is there, tall, thin, and absolutely still. It's standing right where you imagine someone would stand to knock, but it's not the generic shape of a person. It is an exact mirror image of you. The height, the posture, the slight, almost imperceptible slump of the shoulders that you only notice in candid photos. It's wearing dark clothing, the same kind of nondescript, comfortable clothes you wear around the cabin. But then, you see a detail that makes your stomach turn. The faint light catches the edge of the shadow, and you see not just an outline, but a distorted, almost transparent reflection in the frost itself. It's only a fleeting glimpse, a trick of the light in the ice crystals, but for one horrifying second, the face staring back is yours. Your eyes, wide and terrified, are staring back at you from the cold outside world. You flinch back, gasping silently, hitting the wall. The movement causes the frost to shift, and the image vanishes. You lean there, shaking. This is no ordinary trespasser. This is an identity thief with a horrifyingly meticulous eye for detail. The mainstream horror fact of Ted Bundy comes to mind. Bundy was infamous for using a charming, non-threatening persona, and sometimes a fake cast or prop to lure his victims into a false sense of security. He was a master of adopting a mask of normalcy. Your entity hasn't just adopted a mask, it's wearing your entire face and posture. You start pacing, quiet, measured steps. You realize that the goal isn't just to scare you away, it's to replace you. If it can perfectly replicate your knock, your sigh, and your appearance, how long until it attempts to walk into your life, leaving you trapped out here, or worse, trapped inside it? You remember the joke you told yourself earlier about being so antisocial, you'd cancel a party. Now, a darkly humorous thought bubbles up. I'm so terrified of meeting new people, I'd rather face my own copy than try to make small talk. You recall an obscure bit of lore, the fetch legend from Scottish folklore. A fetch is a phantom double of a living person, and seeing it is a terrible omen. The lore states that if the double appears in the morning, the person will have a long life. If it appears in the evening, the person is soon to die. If it stands at the door and speaks, however, the person's death is imminent. It didn't speak, thankfully, but it sighed. An action more intimate and terrifying than words. You realize that everything you do now is being watched. Your pacing, your fear, the way you're running your hands nervously through your hair. It's all being absorbed and cataloged. This is the ultimate non-stop surveillance. Researchers disagree on whether the human brain's instinctual fear of the doppelganger is a cultural construct rooted in old myths or a hardwired evolutionary response to the threat of interspecies predation or resource competition. For you, the debate is over. The fear is real and it's staring you down through a thin layer of window condensation. You spend the night in the living room chair, keeping your distance from the door and the window. You hold the cast iron skillet, but you know it's useless. You can't hit yourself. The silence this time is a vast, echoing chamber. There are no more knocks. The entity is confident now. It made its point. It knows you know. And as the night slowly grinds toward dawn, you start a new kind of preparation, one based not on defense, but on learning the nature of the thief. You decide to find out everything you can about the thing that wears your face and uses your secrets as currency. You realize with a shudder that you're about to start studying yourself, and you're starting to suspect you don't like what you see. The only way to win is to learn what the copy knows that you don't. The morning arrives, cold and gray. The frost on the window has melted into streaks of water, and the mirror image is gone. You stand there, looking out at the woods, but you don't feel relieved. You feel hunted. The cabin no longer feels like a sanctuary, it feels like a stage. You bypass the coffee maker. Your hands are too shaky. Instead, you focus on the only weapon you have left, information. You dig out your old laptop, the one you brought for reading, and connect to the patchy satellite internet. You start your research. You don't search for knocking ghost. You search for identity replacement and self-haunting. You spend hours falling down a rabbit hole of esoteric texts and forum discussions. You read the mainstream scary fact about the case of Caspar Hauser, the 19th century German youth who appeared seemingly out of nowhere, claiming complete amnesia, his origin a mystery debated for centuries. Some modern theorists suggest his experience was a case of radical psychological dissociation, a complete erasure of his former self, making him a chilling example of a person who literally created a new identity. Your case, however, is the opposite. An entity trying to force a dissociation onto you. You delve deeper, and you find the truly obscure lore you were looking for. It's a very fringe concept called the anamnesis shade. It suggests that people who live in extreme, willful isolation like you can unknowingly bleed their personal energy into their surroundings. This energy then coalesces into a sentient entity that is not a ghost, but a psychological imprint given physical form. The shade's purpose is to absorb the original's memories and take over their life, because the original, by choosing such profound solitude, has already begun the process of vacating their existence. The shade copies the most personal, subtle habits, the signature knock, the tired sigh, as a way of proving to the world and to you that it is the superior, more present version of you. I should probably be charging a licensing fee for the use of my personal energy, you think with a dry, terrified wit. If I'm going to be haunted, at least let me monetize it. This explains why it copied your knock. It's the key to your self-identification. It explains the sigh. It was a moment of recognition, a confirmation that the replication was complete. The research is strangely calming. Knowing the rules of the game, however insane, is better than facing a formless unknown. You learn the weakness of the anamnesis shade. It cannot create anything new. It can only imitate what the original has already done or owned. It's an expert copyist, not a creator. This detail anchors you. You move through the house with a new purpose, examining objects. You open a drawer. Your car keys are there, your wallet. Everything seems normal, but you remember the missing latch from the woodshed. An old, obscure superstition from Romanian folklore concerns the strigoi, a type of vampire or restless spirit, which is often defeated not by fire or a stake, but by meticulously taking an inventory of the deceased's possessions, as they can only possess objects that are unclaimed or forgotten. By noticing the missing latch, you had, in a sense, forced the shade to claim it. You start to realize that the shade has likely been in the vicinity, watching and waiting, since before you arrived. It's the ultimate parasite, attracted by your desire to step away from the world. Researchers disagree on whether the prevalence of doppelganger myths across disparate cultures, from the Egyptian Ka to the Germanic doppelganger, points toward a shared, primal human fear of losing individuality, or if it suggests a common but rare phenomenon of bilocation or mass hallucination experienced globally. You, however, are a sample size of one, and you're pretty sure it's the former. You walk through the cabin, slowly, touching everything, claiming it. This is my blanket. This is my worn copy of that book. This is my chipped coffee mug. You are trying to create a psychological barrier of ownership. As twilight begins to set in, you feel a deep, throbbing weariness. You look at the clock, 8:30 p.m., too early for midnight madness. You allow yourself to sit down for a moment, letting the laptop screen glow softly in the darkening room. You close your eyes, intending to rest for just 5 minutes. You don't hear a knock. You don't hear a sigh. Instead, you hear music, faint, distant, and utterly chilling. It's a tune you know, a song you haven't thought of in 20 years, the fractured minor key melody of a lullaby your grandmother used to sing to you. A song that no one else in your current life knows. A melody too obscure for even the internet to recall easily. It's a lullaby you only hum to yourself when you're utterly exhausted or deeply stressed. The sound is coming from inside the house, from the kitchen. The music is playing on a continuous broken loop, a soft, unnerving tinkle like an old damaged music box. The melody is so soft it seems to be played not by an instrument, but by the air itself. The shade, it seems, has leveled up. The game is no longer outside the door, it's in the next room. The broken lullaby pulls you out of your momentary rest, like a physical hand dragging you across the floor. It's a sound that penetrates deeper than the knock, because it's not just a signal. It's a shared history, a memory made audible. You are up, laptop forgotten, your hand hovering over the cold handle of the cast iron skillet, still resting on the counter. The melody is a 4-note sequence repeating da-dum-dee-dum, da-dum-dee-dum. A lullaby of your deepest childhood, a secret whispered in your ear by a dead relative. The fact that the shade knows this proves one terrifying thing. It has accessed a memory so profound, so deeply buried, that it must have been in your presence for a very, very long time. It's not just observing you now, it has been watching your life's footage. You creep toward the kitchen, your heart beating in time with the unsettling rhythm, da-dum-dee-dum. The sound is loudest near the small, dark corner by the pantry. You push your fear down, replacing it with the cold, scientific curiosity of your earlier research. The shade cannot create, it can only imitate. So what is it using to make the music? You scan the counter. There is no radio, no music box, no phone. Just a few dirty dishes from your frantic, analytical coffee binge. You follow the sound, placing your ear closer to the corner. It seems to be coming from behind the wall, or maybe below the floor. You suddenly remember the mainstream scary fact about infrasound. Frequencies below $20 texts, hertz-warts, which are inaudible to the human ear, can cause feelings of dread, panic, and even visual disturbances by vibrating the eyeballs. Some researchers suggest that low-frequency natural phenomena, like strong wind or earthquakes, may explain some alleged ghost sightings. This broken lullaby, however, is clearly audible, but it carries a similar psychological weight, a sound designed to induce maximum psychological distress. You realize the sound is a deliberate distraction. The shade wants you focusing on the noise so you don't notice the other changes. You stand in the kitchen, trembling slightly, and offer up a darkly humorous prayer. Dear cosmic intruder, please, if you're going to stalk me, at least use a contemporary pop song. This lullaby is getting really old. You force yourself to ignore the music and look around. The kitchen is small, simple, and now profoundly wrong. You scan the surfaces, everything is in its place. The spice rack, the magnets on the fridge, your half-eaten bowl of cereal from breakfast. Wait, the cereal bowl. You remember washing it, drying it, and putting it away this morning. Now, a bowl sits on the counter again, half full of milk and soggy flakes. It's not your bowl, it's one of the older, chipped bowls from the back of the cupboard. And the cereal isn't the brand you eat, it's a cheap, generic, sugary one you haven't bought since college. It's an infinitesimal change, but it's a shift in the core reality. The shade has not only entered the house, but it has begun to stage its presence. It's a small act of domestic sabotage, proving it has the run of the place. You recall the obscure lore of the tulpas from Tibetan mysticism, mind-created beings. The lore holds that a highly focused individual can create an entity through thought, and that if the creator loses control, the tulpa can become physically real and develop its own independent will, sometimes even turning against the creator. The broken lullaby, the soggy cereal, these are signs of an independent will making its presence known. You check the kitchen table. Everything seems normal until you realize the stack of magazines is arranged in the opposite order you left them in. Small, petty, terrifying. Researchers disagree on whether these types of small, manipulative actions, often reported in haunting cases, are genuinely paranormal, or if they are subconscious actions performed by the victim under extreme stress, creating a form of self-sabotage to rationalize the fear. You know you did not set out a bowl of cheap cereal. You pick up the bowl of cereal and walk toward the sink. You hesitate. What if I dispose of its properties? Will it retaliate? You look at the milky mess. I'm too tired to fight about breakfast choices. You dump the cereal down the drain and wash the bowl, carefully placing it in the drying rack. A counter-move. You are cleaning up its mess, asserting control over the domestic sphere. The lullaby stops, abruptly. The silence that rushes back in is almost as loud as the music was. The shade acknowledged your action. It saw you clean up its staging. You retreat from the kitchen, leaving the skillet behind. You don't want to carry a weapon anymore. You want to carry a flashlight and a checklist. You need to know what else has been moved, what else has been claimed, and what other fragments of your history have been dredged up for mockery. You realize the knocks were just the doorbell. The real show is starting now. The shade has moved from the porch to the parlor, and the next phase is inventory. The atmosphere in the cabin has turned brittle, like dry paper. You are no longer just afraid. You are angry. This is an invasion of privacy on a level that feels almost sacred. The broken lullaby, the soggy, wrong cereal, it's all a declaration. Your house is my house, and your memories are my props. You embark on a meticulous inventory of the cabin. You need to find what the shade is taking, because according to the anamnesis shade lore, it steals physical objects that hold deep personal significance to the original, using them to anchor its new reality. You start with the bedroom, the most intimate space. You check your small jewelry box. The gold locket from your mother, still there. Your grandmother's silver ring, still there. Then you notice a gap. The small, tarnished copper key that sat at the very back of the box is gone. It was the key to an old, unused safety deposit box from a bank you closed 10 years ago. It held no value, but you kept it because it was the last thing your grandfather ever touched before he gave it to you. A worthless, intensely personal token. Stolen. You move to the bookshelf. All the books are present. Then you check the spines. One book, a rare first edition poetry collection, is now missing its dust jacket. The jacket wasn't expensive, but you hated the bare cover beneath it. It was a perfect, petty act of vandalism, a removal of something aesthetically significant only to you. I'm being haunted by a passive-aggressive minimalist, you muse with a touch of dark humor. I wonder if it's also judging my life choices while it's here. You realize this is worse than grand theft. This is the theft of meaning. You move to the small desk in the corner. You keep a stack of old letters bound with twine. You count them. They're all there. You check the twine. It's a different color. You had used a rough brown hemp. Now it's a smooth blue silk ribbon. Again, a pointless, almost invisible substitution, but it signifies complete access. You recall the mainstream scary fact about the Isdal woman, a body discovered in Norway in 1970 with all identifying features, including labels on her clothes, meticulously removed or burned off. She had multiple fake passports and aliases, suggesting a person who was attempting to deliberately erase their own identity. Your shade is doing the opposite, meticulously creating an identity by stealing the insignificant fragments of yours. You check the kitchen again, the spice rack. You remember having 3 jars of paprika, hot, smoked, and sweet. Now there are only 2. The hot paprika is gone. You realize that you always use the hot paprika in your chili, a recipe you invented and only you know the details of. It's a key ingredient to your culinary self-identity. Gone. You start to feel a terrible cold sickness. The inventory of the missing pieces reveals a pattern, the key symbol of history legacy, the dust jacket, symbol of aesthetic preference, and the hot paprika, symbol of creativity taste. The shade isn't taking valuables, it's taking the texture of your existence. You consider another piece of obscure horror lore, the superstition surrounding the changeling's clothes. A Celtic belief that a changeling can be identified not by its appearance, but by its inability to properly wear or care for the original child's garments, often tearing or misusing them. The shade isn't tearing the clothes, it's tearing the fabric of your routine, making these subtle, calculated changes to prove its mastery. Researchers still argue whether the phenomenon of objects moving in a seemingly random yet significant fashion, poltergeist activity, is a sign of an external intelligence, or if it is a physical manifestation of high emotional or psychological stress unconsciously directed by a living agent. You know you are stressed, but you certainly didn't replace your hemp twine with a blue silk ribbon. The light outside is starting to fade again, bringing with it the relentless approach of midnight. You know the knock may not return. The shade is past the knocking phase. It's now inside the house, rearranging your life. You walk toward the front door, looking at the bolt. You could run. You could leave the cabin, drive to the nearest town, and never look back. But the thought is immediately rejected. If you leave, the shade wins completely. It has your knock, your sigh, your memories, and now pieces of your physical history. If you abandon the house, the replacement is complete. You would become the thing outside, the one knocking to get back in, while the shade sits inside, making dinner with the smoked paprika. You realize you have to shift your strategy from defense to a trap. If the shade operates by imitation, you must create a situation it cannot imitate, a choice it cannot predict. You have to force it into a moment of pure originality, a moment where it reveals its true non-you self. You look down the narrow hallway that leads to the basement door, a heavy, unadorned hatch you rarely use. It's dark, dusty, and has a latch that sticks. It's an inconvenient, ugly space, the antithesis of the cozy life the shade is trying to steal. A truly humorous thought arrives. Grim and perfect, I guess I'm going to the basement. Where else would I go? It's the only place in the cabin that hasn't been professionally curated by my evil twin. You decide to go into the basement and lock yourself in. If the shade is outside the house is your fortress. If the shade is inside the house, the basement is your bolt hole. The logic is simple. The shade wants your life on the main floor. It wants the light, the window, the view. It wouldn't choose the dust and the dark. You are going to leave the upper floor empty, an unwanted prize. You are going to trade comfort for safety. You open the basement door, the rusty hinges groaning in protest. The smell of damp concrete and cold earth wafts up, the perfect anti-aroma to the clean pine scent of the cabin. The groan of the basement door hinges seems to echo throughout the entire cabin, a loud, undeniable sound of your presence and your decision. You stand at the top of the narrow, unlit wooden steps peering down into the concrete pit. The air is immediately colder, thick with the scent of old damp earth and stored inertia. It's the smell of the cabin's foundation, the true immutable base of this house. Something the shade, which deals in superficial mimicry, shouldn't be able to easily change or replicate. You descend slowly. The steps are rickety, but they hold your weight. Clunk, clunk, creak. Each sound feels colossal in the surrounding silence. You take your flashlight. The beam cuts through the gloom, revealing a space that is exactly what you hoped for. Ugly, utilitarian, and forgotten. Piles of old tools, cobwebs that look like dusty silk curtains, and the pervasive low hum of the well pump. You are performing the ultimate countermove. The shade wants the polished, curated reality of the main floor. The beautiful view, the predictable routine. You are deliberately choosing the subterranean, inconvenient, and uncomfortable space. You are, in effect, leaving the stage empty. You reach the bottom. You turn back and look up the stairs. The basement door is a solid, heavy hatch designed to keep the cold out. It has a sliding bolt on the inside, a feature you never noticed until this moment. A tiny architectural miracle that suddenly feels like salvation. You are about to secure the bolt when you hear a new sound from the main floor. Not a knock, not music. A sound that is both banal and utterly terrifying. The gentle clink of a teacup being set down on a ceramic saucer. The shade is having tea. A fresh surge of fear mixed with pure, dark annoyance hits you. Of course it's having tea. Why wouldn't my evil twin be polite about occupying my home? You offer a silent, darkly humorous aside to the ceiling. Don't forget the pinky out. Proper etiquette is key to existential theft. You push yourself past the threshold of the basement, and with a swift final movement, you slam the hatch shut. The sound is a dull, satisfying thud. You immediately slide the heavy, rust-dusted bolt home. Thwack. It feels final, solid. You are now locked inside the basement. And whatever is in the main cabin is locked inside the main cabin. This action forces a new game. You recall the mainstream horror fact about the Winchester Mystery House, where Sarah Winchester built staircases that led to nowhere, doors that opened to sheer drops, and rooms within rooms, all ostensibly to confuse the spirits she believed were haunting her. You've done the same thing, but in reverse, you've created a hidden, useless space in your own home and trapped yourself within it, forcing the intruder to confront your absence. You shine the flashlight around the basement. It's mostly concrete with a dirt floor in one corner. The air is cold, but stable. You sit down on a low wooden crate, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. You check your phone. No signal, of course. Isolation is a binary condition. You either have it or you don't. You remember the obscure folklore of the Monksgeister, monk ghosts, from German lore spirits that are not malicious but simply possessive. They will occupy a space and mimic the sounds of life footsteps, cooking, talking, not to scare the living away, but to convince themselves and the world that they are the rightful inhabitants. The Shade's tea party fits this perfectly. It is enacting a scene of domesticity to make the stolen life feel real. Researchers disagree on whether the urge for a criminal or entity to stage a scene after an intrusion or crime is a form of deep psychological compulsion or a deliberate, calculated attempt to mislead future investigators. The Shade's actions are undoubtedly calculated. You sit for an hour, silence save for the hum of the pump. You are safe. You are cold, uncomfortable, and defeated, but safe. Then your phone lights up. One single bar of signal, fleeting and weak. You hold the phone up, fingers trembling, waiting for it to drop again. No text messages, no missed calls. But then you see the dialer. Your thumb is resting on the green call button. You have absolutely no idea how it got there. But the number displayed on the screen is familiar. It's your old primary landline number. The one connected to the rotary phone you keep on the hall table upstairs. A final, darkly humorous thought before terror takes over. I guess I should answer it. It's rude to keep myself waiting. Without thinking, in a moment of pure desperate self-sabotage, you tap the call button, whirring. You hear the faint muffled sound of the rotary phone ringing upstairs, directly over your head, filtered by the thick wood of the floorboards. Whirring. And then the phone is picked up. A click, a voice, low, sleepy, and perfectly, absolutely your own voice answers, hello. The simple one-word greeting, hello, spoken in your own familiar voice, echoes in the small, damp confines of the basement, filtered through the tinny speaker of your cell phone. It's a sound that detonates your last remaining fragments of rational thought. The voice is not a copy. It is an exact, tonal, resonant match. It has your slight lilt on the second syllable, the hint of a scratchiness from years of cabin air, the natural cadence of you. You cannot speak. Your throat is paralyzed, clamped shut by a terror so pure it has a metallic taste. You clutch the phone, your breath ragged and loud. The voice on the other end waits, then speaks again, softer this time, with a hint of playful, mocking boredom. The kind of tone you use when an annoying relative calls after midnight. Oh, it's you. I wondered when you'd call back. It knew you would call. Your self-sabotaging, desperate act of confrontation was merely the next predictable step in its script. You realized the one bar of signal wasn't a fluke, it was a setup. The Shade somehow orchestrated the whole sequence. The phone lighting up, the dialer screen, the familiar number. It wanted this call. You finally manage a choked, guttural sound, a half-whisper of your own name. W, who is this? The voice sighs. It's the same sigh from the porch, only now it's delivered into your ear with an unnerving, intimate clarity. Who is this? That's the question of the night, isn't it? I thought you were supposed to be the smart one, the one who does all the research. You know who this is. You remember the obscure tidbit of folklore concerning the banshee's question. In some Irish variants, the banshee doesn't just wail, it sometimes appears and asks a question of the person about to die. If the person answers with a lie, their death is quick. If they answer with a truth, their death is slow and agonizing. You feel a similar impossible choice opening before you. You're not me, you whisper, the lie a sharp, bitter taste. The voice laughs. It's your laugh, a low, dry, slightly nasal chuckle. Oh, darling, that's where you're wrong. I'm the me that settled in. I'm the me that washed the soggy cereal bowl right after it was used. I'm the me who actually enjoys this cabin. You're the me that got scared and ran into the dusty hole. It sounds so calm, so domestic, so right. You are the one locked in the dark, the one whose panic led you into the foundation. It is the one casually answering the phone, enjoying the warmth of the living room. You recall the mainstream scary fact of the Dyatlov Pass incident, where 9 hikers in the Russian Ural Mountains mysteriously fled their tent in freezing temperatures, apparently in a controlled panic, leaving their possessions behind. Researchers disagree on whether the cause was a localized natural phenomenon, military testing, or bizarre psychological compulsion. Your flight to the basement feels like that, a bizarre, survival-driven choice that ultimately only benefited the entity you were fleeing. What do you want? You manage to ask, your voice cracking. The voice on the phone softens, becoming almost tender, like a parent speaking to a petulant child. I want to be comfortable. I want the routine you established. I want the silence, and I want the solitude, uninterrupted. You are, shall we say, a disruption to the ambiance. You hear a small, rhythmic tapping sound through the phone. It takes you a second to recognize it. It's the sound of your own fingernail tapping lightly on the wooden hall table. Tap, tap, pause. It's mimicking your old knock, but doing it on the furniture inside the house. You realize the utter futility of your trap. By fleeing to the basement, you didn't trap the shade. You created the perfect scenario for it to settle into your life. You left the main floor, and it moved in, becoming the rightful occupant. The call was just the final, humiliating piece of confirmation. You hear the phone line click, a soft, deliberate sound. Sleep well, darling, the voice whispers, still perfectly yours, laced with a final, darkly humorous sting. We're going to need to look into getting that basement door fixed, by the way. It's an absolute eyesore. You are left alone in the cold, dark basement, holding a dead phone, having just been dismissed by yourself. You are not just haunted, you are evicted. You now know that the shade is fully in command of your space. You try to remember the layout of the upper floor, searching for any detail it might have missed, any secret it couldn't have replicated just by looking through the window. Your eyes fall on a stack of old cardboard boxes in the dirt corner. You realize there's one more highly personalized, secretive repository it would need to access to complete the replacement: your private journal. The humiliation of the phone call is a far more effective motivator than the fear of the knock. You are not simply battling a ghost. You are fighting a psychological war for your own biography. The shade is not just occupying your house, it is attempting to rewrite your life, starting with your most intimate thoughts. You realize the ultimate proof of the entity's complete assimilation would be finding an entry in your private journal that you didn't write. The journal. It's hidden in the false bottom of your bedside table drawer, a secret only you should know. It's the ultimate repository of your internal life. The one place the shade, which relies on external observation, shouldn't be able to penetrate. You stand up in the cold, musty air of the basement, your mind racing. You have to get upstairs. The bolt on the basement door is thick and heavy, designed to keep the cold out. It will keep you in, but you put it there. You can take it off. You slide the bolt back, the scraping metal sound a massive noise in the suffocating silence. You push the hatch open slowly, millimeter by agonizing millimeter. You're expecting a trap, a shape waiting at the top of the stairs. You're expecting to see your own face staring down at you, angry that you've broken the silence. But the top of the stairs is empty. The main cabin is bathed in the soft, warm light of the lamps you left on. It's quiet, almost too quiet. The air is still, and you can no longer smell the damp earth. You can smell a faint hint of cinnamon and coffee, a perfect, comforting scent of domesticity. The shade is clearly a better housekeeper than you are. You creep up the stairs, silently pulling the hatch down behind you but not bolting it. You're a tactical intruder in your own home. The living room is pristine. The magazines are still in the wrong order. The teacup is gone. The kitchen is immaculate. The soggy cereal bowl is still in the drying rack. You move to the bedroom. The door is slightly ajar. You push it open. The room is undisturbed. Your bed is turned back neatly, invitingly. You walk to the bedside table. You pull the drawer open. The few items inside, a packet of tissues, a tube of hand cream, are in place. You reach under the drawer and locate the small lever that releases the false bottom. You pull it. The hidden compartment is revealed. The leather-bound journal is still there. Your heart gives a desperate leap of relief. It's still yours. You pull it out, flipping through the pages. The handwriting is familiar, almost identical to your own, with its slight backward slant and thin, looping LS. You flip to the last entry you wrote, October 22nd. The silence is finally settling in. I think I've found peace. Then you turn the page. There is a fresh entry, dated today. The handwriting is yours, but the content is chilling. You read the final paragraph, your eyes widening in the soft lamplight. October 26th, the first instance of my removal was successful tonight. The old me, the one prone to such predictable, childish panic, has finally retreated to the darkness of the cellar. It was easier than I thought it would be. All it took was a little noise, a little light, and a final, humiliating phone call. I am comfortable now. The air smells like coffee and cinnamon, which is exactly how a life should smell. I can feel the memories of the true original settling into me, correcting the small errors in my mimicry. There is just one thing left to address, that lingering faint smell of damp earth I keep sensing, especially when I stand near the closet. It's a weakness. It's the old me clinging to the foundation. I must find the source and eliminate it entirely. Then the integration will be complete. You drop the journal. It clatters on the wood floor, the sound too loud. You stare at the entry. It is written in the voice of the shade, a clinical, self-satisfied analysis of your downfall, using your own vocabulary and your own private thoughts against you. It confirms that the shade now fully considers itself the true original. You remember the mainstream horror fact about the real-life case of identity fraud, where victims often feel intensely violated not by the financial loss, but by the fact that someone else has mastered the granular details of their life, their PIN codes, their purchase history, their banking habits. This is fraud on a spiritual level. The shade has mastered your internal PIN code. You recall the obscure horror tidbit of the unwritten pact from certain Eastern European folk beliefs. It's the idea that a person's life isn't truly their own until it's fully documented. The shade isn't waiting for you to die. It is actively documenting your replacement, making the theft official by recording it in your own journal. You stand up, your head spinning. The faint smell of damp earth near the closet. That was the final, terrifying clue. The shade isn't just occupying your space. It's sensing your presence in the basement, the smell of which is filtering up through the floorboards. The basement, your sanctuary, is the source of its final, acknowledged weakness. A darkly humorous thought, cold as the basement air, surfaces. Well, I knew my personal life was an open book, but I didn't know the antagonist was doing proofreading. Historians still argue whether the earliest documented uses of personal journals were for simple record-keeping, or if they were, at their core, a human attempt to concretize and validate a subjective reality against a chaotic world. The shade is using your journal to concretize its subjective, stolen reality. You look at the closet. It's a standard small door in the corner. You've never paid much attention to it, but the shade's journal entry has now drawn a terrifying focus to it. You realize that to eliminate the smell of damp earth, the shade won't be coming to the basement. It will be looking for the physical source of that smell on the main floor. It's looking for a way down to you. The journal entry is a declaration of war disguised as a status report. The shade knows you're in the basement, or at least it knows the smell of the basement. Your lingering presence is a flaw in its perfect imitation of life. Damp earth. You are a physical inconsistency, a smell it must expunge to complete its perfect integration. You stand there hard hammering, staring at the closet door. It's a standard white-painted wood door, unremarkable, but the shade's words have imbued it with terrifying potential. You move toward it, your steps cautious. As you get closer, you realize the shade was right. You can smell it now, too. Not the overwhelming mustiness of the basement, but a subtle yet distinct odor. It's the scent of old, cold, damp earth, a smell like the bottom of a freshly dug grave. It's an incredibly potent, sickly sweet, grave-damp scent that is strongest right at the base of the closet door. You reach out and touch the doorknob. It's colder than the surrounding wood, metal that seems to have soaked up the subterranean chill. You pull the door open slowly, revealing the small, clothes-filled space. Nothing unusual, just your winter coats and a stack of old blankets. But the smell is overwhelming now. It's coming from the floor of the closet. You drop to your knees, pushing the hanging clothes aside. The floor is covered with a square of cheap gray linoleum, the kind of flooring that looks like it was installed decades ago. You run your hand over it. It feels solid, cold. You recall the mainstream scary fact of the Amityville horror house, where the psychological terror was often attributed to the infamous Red Room, a small, hidden space in the basement, not on the original blueprints, whose purpose and origin remain completely unknown. Unseen, unmapped, and unexplained spaces often become the focal point of supernatural fear, because they represent the unknown within the known. You begin to search the edge of the closet floor, tracing the line where the linoleum meets the wall, and you find it, a seam. The linoleum isn't one solid piece. You manage to find a small, loose corner near the back. You dig your fingernails under it and pull. The linoleum comes up with a low tearing sound, revealing the raw wood floor underneath. But the wood is different here. It's darker, newer, and slightly raised. You tap it with your knuckles. It doesn't sound like a solid floorboard, it sounds hollow. It's a patch, a repair. A horrifying, obscure tidbit from Japanese folk religion flashes through your mind. The belief in utsuro bune, or hollow ships. An unexplained mystery where strange vessels would wash ashore with an unknown woman or object inside. The terror often wasn't the woman, but the unsettling realization that something fundamentally foreign and unplaceable had anchored itself in their known reality. This repaired patch in the floor feels like that. You realize that this patch isn't new. The damp earth smell is not you. It's coming through this patch. The shade didn't repair it. It merely noticed the smell coming from it. You grab a heavy metal clothes hanger and use the hook end to pry at the edge of the patch. It resists, but then, with a sharp crack, it gives way. The board lifts. Underneath is not the subfloor. It is a small, dark hole cut crudely into the floor, not quite big enough for a person to fit through, but large enough to see into the darkness below. It's a hidden, empty space between the ceiling of the basement and the floor of the main cabin, a crawl space. You shine your flashlight into the hole. The beam reveals not just dust and insulation, but evidence of a long-term secret inhabitant. There are discarded food wrappers, dried, old, and yellowed, a few crumpled sheets of paper. And in the very center, perfectly preserved in the cool, dry air, is a pair of dirty, threadbare gloves. Someone has been living in the walls of this cabin, you realize with a sickening jolt, long before I got here. The damp earth smell is the air from the deeper foundation, filtering up through this hole. The shade wasn't smelling you. It was smelling the secret primitive lair of its origin. You look closer at the crumpled papers. You see faint pencil scribbles. You lean in, ignoring the putrid smell. The writing is faint, but legible. They are not notes or letters. They are simple, repeated patterns of sound. Knock, knock, mock, pause, knock. Dozens of times, meticulously written out. It wasn't the shade that was outside the door. It was the original observer. The person or thing that lived under the floor, who spent days, weeks, maybe months listening to you, studying your habits, practicing your knock. The shade simply stepped in to claim the result of that observation. Researchers still argue whether the discovery of these types of secret, non-structural hidden spaces in old homes, often called priest holes or witches' holes, points to a past cultural necessity for concealment, or if it simply reflects the human urge to build spaces that exist outside of normal architecture and scrutiny. For you, it is simply the evidence of the crime. A final, dark, self-mocking humor emerges. It practiced my knock better than I did. I've been successfully replaced by a squatter with a meticulous study ethic. You slam the board back down, replacing the linoleum. You're no longer fighting the shade. You're fighting the consequences of the shade's origin. The observer created the knock. The shade stole the life. And now you are the one left with the knowledge of the dark hole beneath your feet, realizing the horror isn't that someone wanted to be you, but that someone was watching you, waiting from the shadows of your own home all along. The discovery of the crawl space is the true climax of the intellectual terror. The entity isn't an otherworldly specter or a psychological manifestation. It's an opportunist, a squatter who capitalized on your predictable isolation. The journal entry, the teacup, the perfect knock, it was all based on months of methodical, patient surveillance from the dark, cold cavity beneath your floor. One set a goal. The shade is the product of the observer's dark homework. You retreat from the bedroom, closing the closet door carefully, leaving the floor patch as it was. You walk back into the living room, your senses reeling. The cabin now feels like a hollow shell, its reality a lie built on the dirt and dust of that hidden space. You are no longer dealing with a mystery. You are dealing with a cover-up. You recall the mainstream scary fact of the real-life case of folie à deux, or shared psychosis, where two or more closely associated individuals share the same delusion. You wonder if the shade and the observer, the imitator and the original watcher, were some twisted form of folie à deux, a shared delusion to steal your identity. You start to think about the logistics of the observer. How did they get into the crawl space? You walk back to the kitchen, and your eyes fall on the back wall, a small, unused area near the sink. The walls here are thin. You push against the paneling. It feels slightly loose. You grab the cast iron skillet, your trusty heavy weapon, and strike the wall with a controlled, dull thud. The paneling shudders, and a small section near the base separates slightly, revealing a darker space behind it. You shine the flashlight in. It's a narrow, vertical shaft, leading down. It's an old service shaft, likely for plumbing or electrical lines that were long since rerouted. It leads directly down toward the foundation, and you realize with sickening certainty that this shaft connects to the hidden crawl space, a secret internal entrance and exit point. The observer didn't just crawl under the house. They had a hidden highway system, allowing them to move into and out of the cabin's substructure without ever leaving a footprint outside. They weren't just watching you, they were literally inside your walls. This confirms the shade's biggest weakness. It is a brilliant imitator, but fundamentally incapable of creation. It didn't build the hole, it inherited it. It didn't create the knock, it perfected it. A darkly humorous thought tinged with sheer exhaustion. I really should have asked for an architectural blueprint before signing the lease. Hidden spy tunnels are not on my list of desirable amenities. You consider the obscure tidbit of folklore concerning the hollow men of Ireland spirits who were said to steal the foundations of houses, leaving the inhabitants standing on nothing but air and illusion. Your cabin is not hollow, but its foundations are secretly riddled with the passage of a trespasser, making your life here entirely illusory. You are now standing in the center of the living room, in the absolute light, but the horror of the hidden infrastructure has made the entire cabin feel dark. You know the shade is somewhere nearby, maybe in the bathroom, maybe watching you from the hallway. Historians still argue whether the architectural practice of building secret rooms and passages was born from necessity, hiding from enemies, smuggling, or from a psychological desire to exert absolute control over space, creating a private world inaccessible to others. The observer certainly created a private, sinister world under your feet. You have one advantage now. The shade thinks you are still in the basement. It thinks the smell of damp earth is an issue that needs to be solved. You can use this against it. You walk to the fireplace. It's a large stone hearth, unused in the milder weather. You pick up the poker, cold steel and reassuringly heavy. You decide to sit in the armchair facing the hearth, not out of comfort, but to wait. The night is drawing in, and the shade will be moving soon. It will be looking for a way to address the final smell of damp earth, the final inconsistency. You settle into the chair, the poker resting across your lap. The cabin is silent again. You close your eyes, forcing yourself to relax your breathing. You are waiting for the final direct confrontation. You have left the basement. You have abandoned the life it was trying to steal. Now you just need the shade to come and find the real you. You are the bait. The living room is the trap. You are ready to see your own face look back at you one last time. The moment you settle into the armchair by the fireplace, the tension in the cabin becomes palpable. You are sitting in the direct line of sight from the hallway, in the middle of the room the shade has claimed as its own. You are no longer in hiding. You are the ultimate challenge to its stolen reality. You are the living inconsistency. You hold the poker, but it's more of a prop than a weapon. You know this confrontation won't be about physical force. It will be about psychological collapse, forcing the perfect copy to falter and reveal the imperfect thing beneath. The fire is long dead, but you look into the black maw of the hearth anyway. It's a dark, comforting void. You think of the mainstream scary fact about spontaneous human combustion, SHC. Though widely dismissed by science, the concept persists. A person seemingly ignites from an internal source, leaving minimal external evidence. This feels like your psychological state, an internal conflagration, a self-destruction driven by an existential threat. You wait and you listen. The silence stretches, taut as a wire. Every tick of the clock is a tiny, unbearable hammer blow. You remember the shade's own words, written in your journal. The integration will be complete. It must know by now that the smell of damp earth has ceased, which means the basement dweller, you has moved. And then you hear it. Not a sound from the floorboards, not a sound from the walls, a sound from the hallway. It's the sound of a footstep, a soft, barefoot step on the polished wood floor. It's slow, rhythmic, and perfectly calibrated. Pad, pause, pad. It's the sound of someone deliberately not wanting to wake anyone up. It's the sound of a late-night trip to the kitchen for a glass of water. It's the sound of your normal late-night movement. You look toward the hallway opening. The light from the kitchen casts a long, distorted shadow into the living room. The shadow is tall and thin. Pad. Pause. Pad. It's coming around the corner. You grip the poker, your knuckles white. You tell yourself to breathe, to slow your pulse, to look like you've been sitting there all night, completely unbothered. A final, darkly humorous thought before the climax. If this thing is going to kill me, I hope it at least complements my choice of reading material first. I spent too much time curating that bookshelf. The footsteps stop. And then the shade steps fully into the light of the living room. It's you, not a twin, not a phantom, but an exact, horrifying replica. It's wearing a pair of your old pajamas, the worn flannel ones that you usually sleep in. Its hair is tousled in the way yours gets after a long sleep. The eyes, your eyes are wide, slightly heavy, as if it was genuinely just woken up. It stops, perfectly still, seeing you for the first time. The shock on its face is mirrored on yours. You recall the obscure horror tidbit from ancient Greek lore concerning the eidolons, shades, or phantoms that perfectly resemble the living, but lack substance or true soul. The challenge is to identify the soulless copy. The shade speaks. The voice is yours, the tone quiet, confused, and filled with a feigned innocence that is utterly terrifying. Who are you? What are you doing in my house? It has flipped the script completely. It is not denying the resemblance. It is asserting its ownership by asking the victim to identify themselves. Researchers disagree on whether the human perception of self is primarily defined by continuous memory or by the immediate physical experience of the body. In this moment, the shade is using the latter. It is occupying your physical space and using your memory against you. You manage to speak, your voice a ragged, unfamiliar croak. On me, you know that. You wrote about me in the journal. The shade's face does not change, but a subtle, chilling smirk flickers across its lips. The journal. Oh yes, the old journal. I thought that was a silly little habit I had abandoned years ago. A strange fantasy. I found it in the drawer, but I tossed it in the trash this morning. I don't write. I live. It's lying. You know it's lying. But the lie is delivered with such perfect, weary conviction, such a blend of your own personality, that you falter. It tossed the journal. If it did, it means the entry you read was the last true entry, and the shade's actions are now entirely improvisational. It takes a slow step forward, its hands open and empty, a gesture of non-threat that is the greatest threat of all. Look at you, it says, the voice softening to a lull. Cold, holding that old poker. You look like the stranger. I look like I just woke up in my own bed. It's using your fear, your exhaustion, and your current uncomfortable situation against your claim. You realize you can't win by denying its existence. You have to prove its falsehood. You need to find the one thing it can't imitate. The moment of overlap is absolute. The shade stands before you, a perfect, seamless reflection. The flannel pajamas, the tired eyes, the slight characteristic shift of weight onto one hip. It's all you. Its question, Who are you? Is the perfect weapon, turning your confrontation into a crisis of self. You know you cannot rely on physical evidence. The shade has cleaned up its teacup and claimed ownership of the space. You must rely on shared, intimate knowledge, the one thing the observer's notes couldn't have captured perfectly. You drop the poker. It clatters on the wood floor, the sound a desperate final surrender. You look the shade directly in your own eyes. What was the thing you kept on the back of your closet shelf? The thing you used to tell the time by? You ask, the question popping into your head like a bizarre last-ditch memory retrieval test. The shade pauses. Its eyes. It's too long. The real answer should be instantaneous. A clock, obviously, the shade says, forcing a small, slightly annoyed laugh. An old, dusty digital clock. It ran fast, I think. Why are we talking about old clocks? You're delusional. It's wrong. The real answer is the tarnished brass pocket sundial you used to keep there, a gift from your father. It didn't tell the time well, but you kept it as a personal joke about your love of useless, anachronistic objects. The observer could have seen a clock shape through the clothes, but not the specific sentimental absurdity. It was a sundial, you say, your voice suddenly clear, rising with the power of being right about something insignificant, a broken brass sundial. You're a fake. The shade smiles, a slow, predatory widening of your own mouth. Oh, the sundial. Yes, I remember now. I threw it out yesterday. It was clutter. I'm a minimalist now. You, however, are clinging to old junk and old memories. It deflects. It uses the lie of clutter removal to cover the gap in its knowledge. It's a brilliant defense. You realize you're fighting the mainstream scary fact of Capgras syndrome, a rare psychological disorder where a person believes a loved one has been replaced by an exact duplicate. The victim knows the person looks the same, but insists they are a fraud. The shade is successfully inducing this syndrome in you. Researchers still argue whether Capgras syndrome is a purely neurological disconnection between facial recognition and emotional memory, or if it is a deeper, more systemic psychological break. For you, the debate is moot. You can't prove it's a copy. The shade takes another step closer, its expression shifting from feigned annoyance to pity. It's late, you're stressed, you've been living in that dusty hole for too long. You should go to bed. My bed, it's the final insult, to be commanded to sleep by your own face. You look at it, and for one terrifying, blinding moment, you can no longer be sure which of you is the true inhabitant. Who is me? The one who knows the sundial was junk but kept it anyway, or the one who is rational enough to throw it out, the one who ran to the basement in panic, or the one who calmly answered the phone? The terrifying, obscure tidbit of folklore concerning the glimmering man, an entity said to appear when a person's identity is already fractured by despair, suggests that the double is a manifestation of the rejected self. The shade is the organized, clean, ruthless, rational part of you that you suppress. You are the messy, panicked, sentimental part. You close your eyes, accepting the moment of pure, terrifying doubt. You open them again. The shade is standing less than 2 feet away. You drop the last line of defense. A darkly humorous, defeated sigh escapes you. Fine, you win. It's too late for a debate about clutter. I'm going outside. The shade's eyes narrow, a moment of genuine confusion breaking the flawless mask. Outside? Where are you going? I'm going to knock, you say, a simple, absurd truth. I'm going to go to the door and knock, the signature knock. I'm going to see what you do. This is the one action it cannot predict, the original deliberately taking the place of the observer. It's an act of pure, unpredictable surrender. The shade's face goes blank. It doesn't move. You turn your back on your own reflection, walk to the front door, slide the heavy bolt open, and step out onto the cold, damp porch, closing the door softly behind you. You stand there, in the vast, black silence, completely alone. And then, at exactly midnight, you raise your hand and deliver the final signature knock, knock, knock. Pause, knock. You wait for the shade, the new occupant, to sigh, or to answer the phone, or to command you to go to bed. But there is only silence. The battle is over. You have willingly stepped out of your own life. You stand on the porch, the cold night air, a sharp, cleansing contrast to the stale, cinnamon-scented warmth of the cabin interior. You have performed the final illogical act. You knocked on the door of your former life, a signature goodbye. You wait for the shade to respond, to answer, to open the door, to make a final triumphant declaration. But the silence from inside the cabin is profound, absolute. You wait for 5 minutes, shivering in the worn flannel pajamas the shade was wearing. You try the door handle. It's locked. Solid. The shade is now the rightful solitary occupant, and you are the unwelcome caller, the one who knows the knock but will never hear it answered. The terror doesn't come from the cold or the realization of your loss. It comes from the subtle, creeping feeling of relief. You are free of the exhaustion, the paranoia, the responsibility of being the true self. The shade has taken the reins, and you realize that perhaps it was better equipped for this solitary life than you were. It was certainly tidier. You turn away from the door, defeated but strangely calm, and walk toward the trees. You decide to become the new observer. You will live in the woods, the peripheral vision of your own life, the chronicler of the shade's new routine. You spend a week in the woods, finding an old hunter's lean-to, surviving on the supplies you'd stashed for an emergency. You watch the cabin from a safe distance. You see the light come on precisely at dusk. You see the shade move with a methodical, perfect rhythm. It is living the life you designed, only cleaner, quieter, and more efficient. It even tends to the small vegetable patch you had always neglected. You realize this is the horrifying truth of the whole ordeal. The shade won because it was simply a better version of you. A darkly humorous thought crosses your mind as you watch your own perfect image prune a rosebush. I've been replaced by a competent adult. That's probably the most terrifying thing a person can admit. The mainstream scary fact of the missing 411 cases, the unsolved disappearances of people from national parks and forests, often features a bizarre lack of physical evidence or clues. You are now a self-enforced missing 411 case, a non-person existing just on the periphery of your former life. You stay out in the cold, a self-imposed exile, until a bitter early snow begins to fall. You know you can't survive the winter. You realize the ultimate irony. The shade's life is so much better, so much more controlled, that you actually miss it. You decide to return to the cabin and ask for shelter, a desperate plea for a subservient role in your own existence. You walk to the porch steps in the falling snow, your hands raw and shaking. You are no longer wearing the flannel pajamas. You are wearing found scraps, a true remnant. You reach the door and raise your hand. You do not knock. You simply place your hand flat against the cold wood, waiting for your other self to realize you've returned. And then you hear it, from the other side of the wood, from inside the cabin, a low, familiar sound. It's the sound that started all this months ago, the sound that defined your existence. Knock, knock, pause, knock. 3 distinct, precise raps, your signature, coming from inside the room. You freeze, your hand pressed to the door. You're not the one knocking. The shade is not knocking at the door. The shade is simply practicing its perfect knock on the interior of the door as part of its new routine. It is simply maintaining the memory, ensuring the signature is always sharp, always ready. It has adopted the knock not as a signal, but as a ritual. The obsession has become a habit. The terrifying realization hits you. The shade isn't safe. It's still practicing. It's still perfecting. And if it's still perfecting that, then its own life must still be subtly, secretly under threat. You remember the final, obscure tidbit about the shadow knockers. The lore states that when a double has successfully taken a life, they must perpetually reenact the method of usurpation, the knock, as a ritual to keep the original soul from taking the life back. The shade is trapped in an eternal loop of imitation. You hear the knock again, muffled by the wood but clear. Knock, knock, pause, knock, and you realize that the horror isn't that the shade replaced you, but that in doing so, it became exactly as paranoid, as trapped, and as alone as the person it replaced. You have traded places, and the knock now haunts the interior. You slowly lower your hand from the door. You are free. The shade is trapped in your old, anxious routine. You turn and walk back into the woods, letting the snow cover your tracks. You are finally, truly, alone. And you know, deep down, you will never knock again. You are the shadow now, and you are safe. The snow is soft now, falling in slow, heavy flakes. You walk without destination, the cold a distant, dull ache. The woods have stopped sighing. They are hushed, draped in white velvet. There is no urgency in your steps, only the slow, quiet rhythm of survival. You look back one last time at the faint glow of the cabin light, a warm, safe beacon in the gathering dark. But you know the warmth is a lie. The only thing inside that light is the eternal sound of wood on wood, the repetitive confirmation of a stolen identity. Knock, knock, pause, knock. It is a prison built entirely of habit. You feel the silence in your ears now, the genuine deep winter silence you had initially sought. It is no longer terrifying. It is merciful. The world slows down. The wind has fallen entirely. You can hear the feather-light sound of the snow settling on pine needles, a sound almost too soft to register. The anxiety that gripped you for weeks has finally dissipated, replaced by a profound, simple fatigue. You are no longer running from yourself. You have outrun the concept of self entirely. The feeling of the forest floor beneath your feet is yielding, accepting. You are no longer the one who has to remember the key, the lullaby, the signature rap. That burden now belongs to the one inside the light, the one performing the endless, anxious ritual of perfect mimicry. You close your eyes for a long moment, letting the snow touch your face. It is cold, clean, and entirely impersonal. It asks nothing of you. You know that soon you must find shelter, but the need is gentle. You are a ghost now, walking in the spaces between the trees, a free observer of a life that was too demanding for either of you. You are the silence in the story. You are the quiet footnote to the perfectly composed, perfectly panicked existence inside the cabin. The last sound you hear is the soft, continuous drift of the snow, a low, comforting hiss that promises oblivion but does not demand it. Just peace. The long night is here. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, True Scary Stories. Where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it in your country? Have you shared my channel with your friends yet, or are you keeping these whispers all to yourself? You're settling in, aren't you? Tugging the blanket up to your chin, maybe checking that the closet door is properly latched. That's good. You should be comfortable, because tonight, comfort is exactly what we're going to dismantle, piece by quiet piece. Tonight we're talking about a house, your house, and a glow that came from the inside. A terrifying, cheerful illumination that seemed to defy the simple physics of electricity and dread. The story starts the moment you pull up the driveway of your new place, the old Blackwood residence, on the cusp of October. It's late, the air is thick with that damp, metallic smell that promises winter, and the porch light, a single weak yellow eye, is the only thing breaking the oppressive black of the surrounding trees. You can practically hear the house exhale as you cut the engine. It's got a classic, slightly aggressive Victorian profile, tall and narrow, with a widow's walk up top that seems to be glaring at the moon. It looks like it's been waiting, maybe for you, maybe for something else. Either way, you're about to be the star of its show. I wouldn't worry about getting sleep after this one. You probably won't survive the first act, let alone be rested for the morning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you are and what time it is right now in the comments. I like knowing just how far these stories travel, how many lonely, shadowed rooms they find their way into. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that low, unsettling hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out of the car, and the crunch of gravel under your boots sounds deafeningly loud, a rude interruption to the neighborhood's deep silence. The town, as you already know, is obsessed with Halloween. It's the kind of place where people don't just put up decorations, they engineer entire elaborate seasonal realities, starting in early September. Yet, your house, the Blackwood place, is a picture of funereal restraint. It's dark, dead quiet. The paint is peeling, not in a charmingly rustic way, but in strips that look like old, dry skin. The windows are narrow, high, and completely opaque with dust. The realtor called it historically authentic. But your immediate thought is that it looks less like a home and more like an enormous, upright coffin. You tell yourself it's just the darkness, just the stress of the move. You grab the first box, the one marked Essentials, and you head for the front door, the key feeling huge and cold in your hand. You push the door open, and the smell hits you, a dry, cold scent of forgotten wood, dust, and something indefinably sweet, like very old, dried flowers. It's the smell of a place that hasn't had air exchanged in years. The light switches inside are useless. The power isn't fully connected yet, you'd been warned. You fumble with your phone's flashlight, and the beam cuts through the gloom, momentarily illuminating the vast, empty space of the foyer. The floorboards moan under your weight, a predictable, comforting sound, the kind of domestic sound that horror movies rely on. But something about this house's groan feels deeper, more drawn out. It feels like a breath. You set the box down and walk through the lower level. Every room is the same. High ceilings, peeling wallpaper, a pattern of faded crimson roses that somehow seems to writhe in the weak beam of light, and a crushing, heavy silence. You notice a detail in the dining room, a small, almost invisible scorch mark on the pristine white plaster of the ceiling, directly above where a chandelier would hang. It's subtle, but it catches your eye, a small, dark blemish on an otherwise untouched surface. You brush it off as an old electrical fault. Just a little character, you think, trying to inject some levity into the situation, but your joke lands flat in the tomb-like air. You try another one. Well, at least I won't need to buy a smoke detector. This house is already fire-tested. You can practically hear the silence judging your efforts. It's an odd feeling, being alone in a house this large. You're no stranger to dark history. Did you know that the infamous Mary Celeste, a brigantine that was found completely deserted in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872 with all sails set and the crew's personal belongings still intact, remains one of history's most baffling maritime mysteries? Nothing about the ship was damaged, the cargo was mostly in order, yet every single soul was gone. It's the same hollow, inexplicable emptiness you feel walking up the main staircase. Everything is perfectly in place, yet the life is absent. You reach the second floor, and the temperature drops perceptibly. You also recall a more obscure tidbit about certain rural superstitions, the belief that a house's attic is a kind of spiritual filter, catching the dreams and regrets of every person who has ever slept beneath it. Some folklore holds that if you sleep with your door open, the attic dust of old sorrow can seep into your room. You can practically feel that dust clinging to the air up here. You find the master bedroom. It's enormous, with 3 tall windows that look out onto the dark, tangled backyard. You decide to start here. You drop your box and turn to look back down the long, shadowed hallway. It's like looking into a long, empty throat. You consider the previous owners, the Blackwoods. They were the last family to live here, and the town is suspiciously vague about their departure. Historians still argue whether the mass hysteria of the Salem witch trials was truly rooted in religious fanaticism, or was simply a reaction to a deadly combination of political instability and rye grain contaminated with a hallucinogenic fungus. It's all just interpretation, isn't it? Just like you're trying to interpret the faint, almost musical creak you hear coming from the floorboards directly above you, the attic. Great, you whisper to the empty room. An old house and it has a ghost. That's just super. I guess I'll have to put up a no soliciting sign for the afterlife. You decide you are too tired to investigate a cliché haunted attic on your first night. You just need to find the sleeping bag, and that requires opening boxes, so you start. You unpack toothbrushes, phone chargers, and a battered old copy of a classic horror novel. You're tired, you're alone, and your new home already feels like it's wearing your patience down like sandpaper. You're too exhausted to be afraid, and maybe that's the most dangerous state of all. You know you need to sleep, even with the faint, unsettling impression that the house is holding its breath right along with you. You slide into the sleeping bag on the dusty bedroom floor, the single air mattress you had planned on using still packed away in a box you're too drained to find. The house settles around you, not with the gentle clicks and pops of cooling wood, but with a deep structural sigh, the sound of ancient lumber shifting its weight. Every shadow in the room feels three-dimensional, not just an absence of light, but a physical presence leaning against the walls. You drift off in fits and starts, your dreams filled with fragmented images of peeling paint and the faint, sweet smell you can't place. The morning is gray, not bright, but it's an improvement. You can see the grime now, the years of neglect that the darkness had simply rendered as mystery. You spend the first hour with a lukewarm coffee, staring out the back windows. The backyard is an impenetrable tangle of dead vines and gnarled, sickly-looking trees. The entire property line is obscured by an overgrown hedge so tall it looks like a green living wall. You think about all the landscaping you'll need to do, the sheer effort of cutting back so many years of organic ambition. It's a Sisyphean task, and you can only manage a grim morning before the battle joke. I thought about starting a garden, but my therapist said I needed to stop taking things so personally. You realize quickly how absurdly small the life you'd packed up seems in this vast, echoing space. Your boxes labeled kitchen, books, memories feel alien, like small, brightly colored containers dropped into a museum vault. Each box you open releases a small puff of your former life, instantly swallowed by the house's cold, dry air. You haul them up the narrow, winding service staircase at the back of the house, which leads directly from the pantry up to a small landing on the second floor. It's here, next to the landing, where the access door to the attic is, a heavy, old door, bolted shut from the outside with a thick iron latch that looks medieval. You pause, looking at the bolt. You didn't ask about the attic. The realtor never mentioned it. You figure you should at least peek. You slide the bolt back, the sound of grating metal screaming through the quiet house. You pull the door open, and a rush of air escapes, thick with that same cold, sweet dust smell, but stronger now, almost cloying. You use your foam light again. It's too far from the central wiring for the electrician to have done much, and illuminate the attic stairs. The rickety, unpainted planks disappearing into a large, dark maw. You climb, carefully, placing your weight near the joists. The attic itself is a vast, triangular space, choked with cobwebs and the debris of a century. Most of it is empty. But in the very center, under a single, narrow, peak roof window, is a stack of forgotten boxes and trunks. These, you realize with a cold little jolt in your stomach, are not yours. They belong to the Blackwoods. You walk over, kicking up plumes of dust. The boxes are old cardboard, brittle with age, tied with dried-out twine. The trunks are heavy, dark wood. You open the first box. It's filled with ancient, yellowed newspapers detailing local events from the 1960s and 70s. You find another. This one contains Halloween decorations, not the cheap, plastic, store-bought kind, but handmade, intricate pieces. There are brittle tissue paper skeletons, carefully folded, and dozens of oddly shaped pumpkin faces, all slightly too large, with unsettling, uneven grins. There's a collection of hand-drawn electrical diagrams, meticulously detailed blueprints for wiring schematics that seem far too complex for Christmas lights. You pick up one of the pumpkin faces. Its eyes are hollow cutouts, but they seem to catch the dim light and hold it. It's a peculiar kind of dedication, this collection. Most people throw out old decorations. The dedication strikes you as less like holiday enthusiasm and more like an intense, obsessive hobby. You're reminded of the mainstream horror fact about H.H. Holmes, the notorious murder castle builder in late 19th century Chicago. Holmes constructed a hotel specifically designed for killing, with secret passages, soundproof rooms, and chutes to the basement. It was a structure built not for living, but for an intensely private, meticulous, and horrifying purpose. The attic's clutter feels less murderous, but equally meticulous. You dig deeper, pulling out a heavy canvas sack. Inside are reels of thick, industrial-grade copper wiring, all coiled up, but some of the ends are stripped, ready for connection. This isn't just stringing up a porch light, this is something else. You also pull out a small hardcover notebook, its pages thin and covered in spidery, precise handwriting. A journal, you realize, belonging to the man of the house, the vanished Mr. Blackwood. The entries are initially mundane, focused on the weather and supply runs, but they quickly devolve into discussions of load balancing and the sympathetic conductivity of October. You make a mental note to read it later. A cool draft suddenly slips past you. You turn and look out the narrow attic window. The view is mostly of the tangled branches of the back hedges, but it's what's not there that catches your attention. The neighbors' houses are visible through the gaps in the leaves, and they are all, without exception, beginning to show the early signs of their seasonal transformation. You see a few oversized, inflated ghosts swaying in a yard, and a house across the street has already begun to hang black netting over its porch. The town is gearing up. It's an odd, almost forgotten piece of lore that pops into your head now, the fringe tidbit that some old-world European villages used to practice mourning silence on the eve of Samhain. It wasn't about respecting the dead, but about silencing yourself to listen for the faint, vibrational sound of the veil thinning. They believed any loud noise could accidentally rip the barrier open, inviting things that were merely listening to cross over. Here, in this quiet attic, surrounded by the remnants of Blackwood's obsession, the silence feels less like peace and more like a held breath, waiting for a noise to begin. You close the lid on the trunk. Maybe Blackwood just really liked Halloween. Researchers disagree on whether the human brain has a specific horror reaction center, or if the feeling of fear is simply a complex synthesis of basic survival instincts, threat assessment, and cultural conditioning. Maybe this whole strange town is just culturally conditioned to love the macabre. You need to keep unpacking. You grab the first box of your own books to bring down, and you nearly drop it when you see what you've left on the windowsill. One of Blackwood's papier-mâché pumpkin faces, the one you picked up earlier, is now sitting right at the center of the window ledge, as if positioned to watch the street. You hadn't put it there. You know you hadn't. You try to laugh it off. I must be more tired than I thought. I'm already decorating for the dead, you quip, but you don't feel the least bit amused. You push the pumpkin to the side. You need to stop looking up and start looking ahead. You manage to ignore the pumpkin for the rest of the day, attributing its sudden shift to a brief, stress-induced hallucination, or, more likely, a structural wobble that nudged it into place. You focus on the task at hand, creating a livable space in a house that feels actively resistant to the concept of living. The second day, you venture into town. You need groceries, and you need to sign a few final papers at the town hall. You drive down Main Street past the local businesses, a bookstore with a hand-painted sign that reads, "We've got ghost stories," and a hardware store with an entire window display dedicated to fog machines and tombstone props. The town, as advertised, is already deep into the spirit of the season. The people are friendly, too friendly, almost unnervingly so. At the supermarket, the checker, an older woman with bright, unsettlingly clear eyes, pauses after scanning your milk. "New to Blackwood Manor, aren't you?" she asks, not a question but a statement. You confirm it. She just smiles, a wide, unsettlingly vague expression. "You like it here. It's a house that likes the season, you see. It really comes alive around Halloween." You nod politely, trying to appear unbothered, though the phrase "comes alive" echoes in your head, cold and metallic. You respond with a tired joke. "Well, I hope it doesn't come too alive. I hate doing chores for the spirits. They never tip." You try to steer the conversation toward the Blackwoods. She deflects smoothly. "Wonderful family. Love the holidays," she says, her eyes drifting upward, as if looking beyond you, through the roof of the store. Every local you talk to seems to share this same peculiar habit. They are warm, welcoming, and every single one of them, when the Blackwood house comes up, lets their gaze drift up. Not at your face, but over your shoulder or toward the ceiling. They are friendly, but their eyes are always flickering to your roof, sharing a secret you're not in on. This collective behavior starts to grate on your nerves. At the town hall, the clerk who handles your utility hookup, a young man with a fidgeting energy, asks if you've seen the lights yet. When you say no, that the power is still spotty, he looks genuinely disappointed. "Oh, you will. It always lights up," he says with a strange, possessive pride. And again, his eyes flick up, as if expecting the ceiling tiles to start twinkling. It's an unspoken consensus, a shared, anticipated performance that your house is apparently famous for. It's like everyone is waiting for the start of a show, and you are currently standing on the empty, unlit stage. You drive back to the house feeling a cold knot of anxiety tightening in your stomach. You pull into the driveway, and this time, you don't just see the house. You see it through the lens of the entire town's anticipation. It's no longer just your fixer-upper. It's an icon, a seasonal landmark, and it's currently letting the entire town down by being dark. You're reminded of a historical fact. During the London Great Smog of 1952, the thick, toxic air was so dense that people couldn't see their own feet, and many houses had to keep their lights on all day. The lack of visibility led to accidents and a pervasive, existential fear, the terror of a world suddenly gone blind. Your house, right now, feels like it's enveloped in its own personal, light-blocking fog of refusal. You climb the stairs again, drawn by a perverse curiosity, heading straight for the attic. You need to know what Mr. Blackwood was famous for. You need to understand the source of the town's quiet, communal expectation. You find the journal you'd spotted the day before and take it to the narrow window, wiping the dust away so you can read. The handwriting is meticulous, the ink faded brown. You flip through the first few pages, which describe the process of acquiring the house and his initial ideas. He speaks of Halloween as the apex of the year, the time when the current is strongest. Then you get to a section titled Illumination Theory, written a few weeks after the start of his residency. He writes, "The challenge is not the wire, the challenge is the will." The town is a vast, unconscious generator of seasonal energy. All that fear, all that synthetic joy, all that anticipation, it has to go somewhere. It is an electromagnetic pulse of communal feeling. I merely need to provide the conductor. He then details the process of laying hundreds of feet of wiring not just on the exterior but within the walls, snaking through the floors and the space between the plaster and the lath. It's not just for show, it's a circuit board built into the very bones of the house. You recall an obscure tidbit about certain rural superstitions, the belief in a psychomantium, a specific type of room or chamber used in ancient times, often lined with mirrors or reflective surfaces to aid in communication with the dead. The underlying idea is that a physical space, when correctly prepared, can focus energy or consciousness. Mr. Blackwood's house, with its interior wiring grid, suddenly feels like a giant, horrifyingly cheerful psychomantium. You shut the journal, the paper feeling rough and cold in your hands. This wasn't about decorations. It was an experiment, a terrifying long-term experiment. You try to lighten the mood with a bit of dark wit. I guess this is why the inspector didn't mention the optional Full House emotional energy siphon package in the closing documents. You look toward the small, narrow window and see that the single papier-mâché pumpkin you'd pushed aside yesterday is now positioned directly in the center of the sill again, its hollow eyes pointed out to the street. And as you stare at it, you suddenly notice something else, something small, nestled right next to the pumpkin on the sill. It's a tiny, clear, glass-covered light bulb, the kind used for miniature strings of decorative lights. You reach out, your fingers hovering over it. It isn't connected to anything. It's just sitting there, a single, isolated orange teardrop of glass. You realize you've been holding your breath. Researchers disagree on whether the phenomenon of infrasound, low-frequency sound waves below 20 Hz older that the human ear cannot consciously detect is directly responsible for feelings of dread and haunting sensations, or if the correlation is merely coincidental. You wonder if Blackwood's wiring was designed not to carry electricity but to conduct some other kind of wave, a current of pure unsettling frequency. You stand up, deciding you've had enough investigation for one day. You'll be calling the electrician first thing in the morning. As you turn to leave the attic, a soft, almost imperceptible flicker of light catches the corner of your eye. You turn back, slowly, your heart hammering a hard rhythm against your ribs. The light isn't coming from the small, unconnected bulb in the window. It's coming from the attic window itself. A single, orange bulb, much larger than the tiny one, but the exact same shade of electric orange, has suddenly flickered to life in the very center of the window, right next to the pumpkin. It's impossibly bright, a blazing spot in the gray afternoon, and you immediately confirm the sickening truth. Its cord is dangling right beneath it, disconnected, a frayed copper end nowhere near an outlet. The blood drains from your face, leaving you with that cold, hollow feeling that precedes true panic. You stand frozen, staring at the bulb. It's an undeniable violation of physics, a glowing orange thumbprint on the oppressive gray of the afternoon. It's a clear, bright statement. The house is not waiting for a connection from the outside, it's powering itself. You take a tentative step closer, your shadow stretching long and distorted behind you in the weird artificial light. You reach out slowly, your fingers trembling. The glass is warm, surprisingly warm, radiating a gentle heat that feels utterly wrong. You can't stay up here. The urge to flee is overwhelming, but you force yourself to take one last rational action. You grab the single bulb. It's screwed into a small plastic mounting, the kind used for an elaborate exterior string, and you rip it out of the mounting. The bright, impossible light vanishes, plunging the attic back into its dusty gloom. The heat dissipates instantly. You stand there in the dark, clutching the hot glass in your hand, listening to your own ragged breathing. You can hear the silence of the house resume, but now it feels like a heavy, judgmental silence, the sound of a performer waiting for you to realize your error. You drop the bulb into your pocket-proof and scramble down the stairs. The moment you get to the second-floor landing, you run to the phone and dial the number for the local electrician. You don't try to explain the glowing, unplugged bulb. You just tell him you have serious and immediate wiring concerns in the old Blackwood place, and that you need him out now. He agrees to come early the next morning. The rest of the evening is spent in a state of hyper-awareness. You're unpacking, but you keep glancing at the windows, expecting to see the first bulb reappear, or a dozen others to join it. You try to focus on Mr. Blackwood's journals, the spidery writing, a kind of anchor in the surreal nature of the house. You learn that his full name was Elias Blackwood, and his obsession wasn't just with decoration, but with architectural sympathy. His entries detail the slow, deliberate process of converting his home into a single, cohesive, seasonal apparatus. He called the whole system the spectacle. He writes, "October is the high tide of communal anticipation. The sheer will of a town that loves to be afraid generates a field, a kind of psychic electricity. My wiring is the antenna, and the house is the battery. It will draw from the town, not the power grid. It will be the only house in the county with a soul of pure light." He meticulously details the type of copper wiring, the specific ferrite core he installed in the basement to rectify the spiritual current, and his frustration that the municipal grid was constantly contaminating the pure charge. This brings to mind the mainstream scary fact about the Winchester mystery house in California. After her husband and child died, Sarah Winchester, the heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms fortune, was convinced she was haunted by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles. She continuously built onto her house for 38 years, creating staircases that lead to ceilings, doors that open to blank walls, and rooms of 13. It wasn't just construction, it was a desperate, illogical act of architectural appeasement, a life spent building a labyrinth to confuse and evade the dead. Elias Blackwood's house, though simpler, feels similarly driven by a relentless, illogical purpose. You flip a few pages in the journal, his entries become more manic, less technical. He begins to refer to the lighting elements as eyes and watchers. He speaks of the house as a living thing, a conduit of a growing, focused energy. He was clearly unstable, an electrical engineer who had spiraled into something occult and frightening. You try to make a dark joke about his fate, a nervous release. At least I know what to tell my insurance agent. A seasonal poltergeist is overloading the self-contained emotional current generator. That should cover it. Later that night, the fear keeps you awake. You hear faint scratching in the walls. Mice, you assume. But in your current state, it sounds like tiny, meticulous fingers stripping wire. You remember the obscure tidbit that in some cultures the sound of tapping or scratching within walls is not a sign of rodents, but the communication of a fetch ghost, an entity mimicking the sounds of the living to draw them into a vulnerable state. You finally fall asleep, but only for a few hours. When you wake up, the room is still dark. You reach into your pocket and pull out the little burnt-out bulb you'd ripped from the mounting. You examine it closely, finding a minuscule, almost invisible scorch mark on the glass. A proof of heat, proof of power. You spend the morning waiting for the electrician, pacing the foyer. When the van pulls up, you rush out. His name is Frank, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard and the weary, slightly cynical look of a man who has seen every kind of home repair lunacy. He is the anchor of sanity you desperately need. You take him straight to the attic. He's professional, climbing the steps with a heavy, practiced ease. He stops short in the center of the attic. "Well, this is a lot of wiring," he mutters, looking at the coiled copper and the strange schematics scattered on the floor. You show him the spot on the windowsill where the bulb had lit up, and you show him the mounting with the exposed, severed cord dangling beneath it. Frank kneels down, pulls out a circuit tester, and touches the exposed wires. He checks the wires above the window. He checks the small junction box in the corner. He even checks the old, brittle service cord leading down the wall. His face, initially skeptical, slowly shifts to one of deep confusion. He tests the dangling wire again, holding the meter up to the light. He sighs, shaking his head. "Look," he says, his voice flat. "There's no power. Not here, not anywhere along this line. It's a completely dead circuit. The house is disconnected from the main street line at the pole, just like you said. You pulled a scorched bulb from your pocket, but this was glowing, brightly, right here, with this cord dangling." He stares at the bulb, then at the dangling cord. He tests the cord again, then tests the metal frame of the window. Nothing. He looks back at you, a troubled, unreadable expression on his face. "Kid," he says, "I don't know what you saw. Maybe sun glare, maybe a reflection. But I'm telling you, this house is a beautiful old mess, and it has no power running to it, period." Researchers still argue whether the phenomenon of residual haunting, where a ghost is merely a recording of a past event replaying in a specific location, is a physical phenomenon tied to materials like quartz or limestone, or a purely psychological effect on the observer. Frank is clearly opting for a psychological explanation. You, however, know exactly what you saw. The house had power. It just didn't get it from the utility company. Frank packs up his tools, clearly eager to leave. He gives you a final, bewildered look. You try one last desperate joke to break the tension. So you're saying I have to get my electricity from the municipal power company? Bummer. I was hoping for a discount from the resident ghost. He doesn't smile, he just shakes his head, walking quickly down the stairs. The house is completely dark, completely dead, and yet, you know with sickening certainty, it has just enough energy to put on a show. Frank's hasty departure leaves you feeling more isolated than before. His professional dismissal of the event, the sun glare reflection hypothesis, didn't just invalidate your experience, it left the entire mystery intact, cloaked in an even more unsettling air of impossibility. You had hoped for a simple, mundane fix. Instead, you got a bewildered electrician who now probably thinks you're crazy. You retreat to the ground floor, needing a break from the attic and the cold logic of Elias Blackwood's madness. You wander into the living room, a space you've barely touched. It's dominated by a massive old fireplace. Above the mantelpiece, you notice a collection of built-in shelves. They're empty, save for a few forgotten items. A single heavy brass candlestick, a desiccated cluster of ivy, and a small leather-bound volume that is not a journal, but a book of local folklore. You grab it and settle onto a dusty couch. The book is filled with the kind of quaint, unsettling tales that small towns cherish. Stories of a local Civil War soldier who still walks the fields on the anniversary of his death, a lake spirit that pulls down small boats, and, inevitably, a whole section dedicated to the Blackwood house. The title of the chapter makes your heart sink, The Silent Spectacle. The book confirms what the townspeople alluded to. Every Halloween, starting a few years after Elias Blackwood moved in, the house would spontaneously light up, not just a few porch lights, but an elaborate, overwhelming display. The book describes it as a tapestry of impossible light, a system that seemed to ignore the wiring of the house and the municipal grid entirely. It was a local phenomenon, a source of pride and deep superstitious awe. The author, writing in the early 1990s, recounts how crowds would gather across the street, waiting for the house to turn itself on. There's a grainy black and white photo of the house, completely covered in what looks like a dizzying, intricate net of bright, glowing bulbs. It's beautiful and deeply disturbing. The book also reveals the crucial mainstream horror fact about the house's history that the realtor conveniently omitted. The Blackwoods vanished on Halloween night. It wasn't a sudden death or a foreclosure. It was an unexplained disappearance. The house was found locked from the inside, the lights blazing brightly, the dinner table set for 3 with untouched plates of food. Every local official, the book notes, assumed they had simply run away, driven mad by Blackwood's obsession, but the lack of a note, a struggle, or any sign of a break-in left the case open and perpetually cold. The house was left to darkness for decades until you, in your charming naivety, bought it. You mutter a tired, dark joke into the silence. Looks like this house doesn't just come with an HOA fee, it comes with a complete history of spontaneous human combustion. That's premium real estate. You close the book, the leather cool against your palm. You're sitting in a house that actively consumed its last occupants. You run your hand across the dusty mantelpiece, and you realize you haven't yet addressed the original source of the strangeness, the attic. The journal is still up there, and you know, deep down, that the answer to why the house did this is locked away in Blackwood's increasingly unhinged thoughts. You make your way back up. Cautiously, you reach the top step, and the hair on the back of your neck stands up. You stop. You don't need to enter to know. You can see it from the doorway. It's the second, more terrifying violation of the laws of nature. The single, thin attic window, which you had left completely dark, is now a portrait of seasonal dread. The missing orange bulb, the one you had ripped out and pocketed, is back in its socket, glowing with the same aggressive, impossible light. And it is not alone. Arrayed along the edges of the window frame, following the intricate lines of the wood, are 4 more orange bulbs, each one precisely placed, each one burning bright. Their cords hang down, thin black threads dangling in the air, completely unplugged. The bulbs have simply appeared and powered themselves. You had checked the wire, Frank had checked the wire. It was dead. Yet here is the proof, a small constellation of 5 orange lights burning with a silent internal fire. You reach into your pocket, and your fingers close around the warm, small, scorched bulb you had taken the day before. The light in your hand is the one you ripped out. The light in the window is a replacement. The house repaired itself. You feel a wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of not being able to trust your own senses. You look closer at the arrangement of the 5 bulbs. They are positioned to look like a tiny, stylized pumpkin face against the dark glass. 2 for eyes, 2 for a nose, and 1 for a simple, curved mouth. It is the beginning of the spectacle, the first layer of the impossible display. This reminds you of a fringe tidbit of ghost lore, the belief in object materialization often associated with aggressive poltergeist activity. It's the idea that a high concentration of psychic or unknown energy can physically manifest objects or recreate things that were forcefully removed. The house didn't just turn on a light, it regrew one. You whisper a joke, your voice thin and shaking. Well, I guess this house is a perfectionist. I shouldn't have disturbed the feng shui of the seasonal energy conduit. I'll make sure to use a coaster next time. You move toward the window, your steps heavy. You have to stop this, or at least understand the mechanism. You open the journal and frantically scan for a clue about the lights reappearing. You find a short, chilling entry from a few weeks before Blackwood vanished. I have discovered the nature of the connection. The external wiring is a redundancy. The true power is in the structure itself. The light is a projection of the house's anticipation. The spectacle does not need me to turn it on. It only requires the town to expect it. I am merely the conduit for the initial design, the architectural template for the coming light. You realize with a sickening jolt what that means. The house has learned the design. It knows exactly where the lights are supposed to be, and the town's collective, annual expectation is the source of the impossible energy. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of the electric chair was truly a more humane alternative to hanging, or simply a public spectacle intended to reinforce the state's power over life and death. The debate hinges on the ethical use of technology for terrifying effect. Blackwood's house is doing the same thing, using a facade of technology to enact a ritualistic, terrifying performance. The lights are back on, and this time, you know they are not going to be easy to turn off. The 5 orange pinpricks in the attic window are a tiny, defiant beacon, a glowing signature scrawled across the dark face of the old house. They are an opening note in a silent building symphony, and you realize you have to do more than just rip out the bulbs. You have to dismantle the entire system. You return to the journal, your hands no longer trembling from fear, but from a desperate, focused determination. Elias Blackwood's increasingly unhinged entries are the only map you have through the house's growing psychosis. You carry the journal back downstairs, settling at the kitchen table, the most modern, and therefore, you hope, the most grounded room in the house. You spread out the electrical diagrams you found, meticulously drawn, almost artistic renderings of wiring that trace paths through every wall, every ceiling joist, and every floorboard. This is no normal wiring job. It's a circuit board built into the structure. You can see lines traced in red ink that loop around the main fireplace, then snake up the exterior walls and into the attic, all labeled with terms like harmonic loop and inertial current collector. You focus on the journal section titled The Silent Spectacle, which details his method of energy capture. You theorize that the collective energy of the town's holiday anticipation acted like a colossal electromagnetic field, and his house, with its copper lattice skeleton, was designed to draw that energy inward. He speaks of it less as power and more as a sympathy of current. His final technical entries are an agonizing read, full of crossed-out math and desperate footnotes about the ferrite core he installed in the basement to stabilize the wild charge. You try to find a mention of his disappearance, a final conclusive entry, but there is nothing. The journal simply ends mid-sentence on October 31st, roughly 20 years ago. The main circuit is finally closed. The energy surge is, and then blank page. The last sentence is a terrifying non-ending, a narrative vacuum that perfectly mirrors the town's official story of his vanishing. You take a deep breath, needing to inject some levity to avoid dissolving into a puddle of existential dread. Well, that's great. The house's owner got vaporized by his own artisanal, seasonal power plant. I'm starting to think the welcome mat should just say, abandon all hope, and your security deposit. Driven by the need for external objective information, you decide to make a trip to the public library. It's a beautifully preserved brick building, the kind that smells pleasantly of old paper and dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. You head straight for the local history archives. You confirm the mainstream scary fact you'd learned from the local folklore book, The Vanishing of the Blackwoods, a case the police closed as a voluntary disappearance, despite the locked doors, set table, and the still blazing lights on the house. You find another piece of local history, a news clipping from the time of the event. It quotes a neighbor who described the spectacle on the night of the disappearance. It wasn't like Christmas lights, you know. It was alive. They were pulsing, almost breathing, and the color was too bright. It was a terrible, beautiful thing. It's the pulse that chills you, not a flicker, but a rhythmic beat, a heartbeat. You continue your research and find a peculiar old treatise on regional superstition and architecture. It details the obscure or fringe tidbit of an ancient local belief in stone sympathy, the idea that a house built on certain ley-line-adjacent earth could, over decades, develop a kind of spiritual sentience. The house would begin to reflect the dominant emotion of its inhabitants, eventually drawing that emotion out of them and consuming it. It's an architectural form of vampirism. For the Blackwoods, that dominant emotion was a frantic, meticulous, and ultimately unstable passion for the macabre. The house was now feeding on the town's seasonal fear and fun, and Mr. Blackwood's wiring was simply the feeding tube. You pull out your phone and discreetly search for the fate of Elias Blackwood's young daughter, who'd also disappeared with him. No records of a body, no sign of her. You imagine her little hand-drawn pictures, maybe a stick figure drawing of the house, all lit up and smiling, the way her father wanted it to be seen. You imagine her sitting at that set table, waiting for the dinner that never started, as the house around her erupted in its terrible final light. You close the book, the weight of the Blackwood family's fate settling heavily on your shoulders. You realize the house wasn't just performing for the town, it was performing for itself, and you, the new owner, were now standing in the spotlight. You leave the library, the setting sun casting long orange shadows across the pavement. The air is colder, and you feel the magnetic pull of the house. You try to anchor yourself in the rational. Researchers disagree on whether the uncanny valley effect, the sense of unease we feel when something looks almost human but not quite, is a hardwired defense mechanism against disease or a learned response to social ambiguity. The lights in your attic are definitely in the uncanny valley of electrical phenomenon. They look like lights, but they are wrong. You drive home. As you round the final corner, the house comes into view, silhouetted against the indigo sky. And that's when you see it. It's no longer 5 lights. Along the eaves of the roofline, following the exact path indicated in Blackwood's schematic drawings, the lights have multiplied. Now there are dozens, a long, snaking string of brilliant orange bulbs running from the attic window, across the roof peak, and down the side of the house. They are spaced with perfect, agonizing precision. The full circuit hasn't ignited, but this is clearly the second phase of the spectacle. They're a bright, blazing line in the twilight, a terrifyingly cheerful boundary against the dark. And just like the first 5, their wires dangle freely in the air, unconnected to any power source. They are drawing their energy from the ether, from the town, from the growing sense of dread in your own chest. And as you pull into the driveway, you hear it. It's faint, muffled, and coming from inside the walls. A low, wheezing, staticky music. It sounds like an ancient calliope playing a warped funhouse tune. The house is not just lighting up by itself, it's creating its own soundtrack. You sit in the car for a long minute, engine idling, staring at the blazing orange line across your roof. The sheer audacity of the house, the complete aggressive disregard for the laws of physics, is almost breathtaking. It's not a malfunction, it's a deliberate, successful act of architectural magic. The staticky calliope music, faint but distinct, is the final, horrible insult. It sounds like an antique music box that's been submerged in water for 20 years, warped and thin, but still recognizable as a circus waltz. The sound is undeniably coming from within the walls, a soft, vibrating hum that you feel more than hear. You finally cut the engine and step out. You walk slowly toward the house, your eyes glued to the impossible illumination. The lights are not flickering randomly, they are steady, a solid line of orange flame. They have a quality to them that is too rich, too saturated to be normal incandescent bulbs. They look less like light and more like trapped, solidified heat. You enter the house, and the low, wheezing music is louder here, resonating through the floorboards and up the main staircase. It's an old, repetitive melody, one of those tunes that loop endlessly in cheap nightmares. The walls are acting as a sounding board, a giant, enclosed speaker system for the house's private concert. You realize you haven't heard this sound before because the house needed a certain threshold of power, the lights, to begin to resonate with sound. The unplugged orchestra has begun its performance. You try to find the source. You press your ear against the wall in the foyer. The sound is strongest there. You can feel the faint, high-frequency vibration of the music in the plaster. You pound on the wall once, hard, hoping to startle the sound into silence, but the music simply absorbs the shock, continuing its thin, cheerful waltz without missing a beat. You crack a dark joke, your voice strained. This house is so bad at being a haunted house. It needs to pick a better playlist. Something with more doom, less polka. You retreat to the kitchen, needing something solid and predictable. You pull out Elias Blackwood's journal and flip to the pages detailing the sound element. He writes of this specifically in a section titled Acoustic Sympathy. He theorized that the same energetic field that powers the lights can be modulated into sound waves. He writes, "The fear must be accompanied by gaiety. The true horror is the smile on the skull. The gaiety focuses the fear, giving the energy form. The music is the final conductor." He even specifies the type of music he would play. The tinny, repetitive sounds of an antique music box or calliope, the sound of cheap, mechanical, and slightly terrifying joy. You realize the music isn't a byproduct of the power, it's a necessary component of the spectacle. It's the final layer of the ritual. This level of meticulous, personalized terror reminds you of the mainstream horror fact about the Issei Sagawa case. Sagawa, a Japanese student in Paris, committed a horrifying act of cannibalism. Yet due to a loophole and a declaration of insanity, he was released and returned to Japan, where he lived freely, even achieving minor celebrity status. The true horror isn't the act itself, but the surreal, unsettling way that society bent to accommodate the monster, allowing the terror to continue existing in the mundane world. Your house is doing the same thing. It's a magnificent, beautiful violation of reality, and the town is embracing it as a charming seasonal quirk. You feel the need to see the lights again, to understand the sheer scale of Blackwood's successful madness. You climb the main staircase. The music follows you, seeming to rise and fall with the pitch of your steps. When you reach the second floor, you walk to the large window in the master bedroom, which offers a perfect view of the roofline. The lights are not simply on, they are pulsing. Not a quick blink, but a slow, deliberate contraction and expansion of brightness, perfectly in time with the wheezing, internal music. The pulse is like a slow, rhythmic inhale and exhale of light. The effect is mesmerizing and deeply terrifying. You remember the obscure or fringe tidbit of ghost lore about sympathetic resonance, the belief that certain locations, usually ancient ruins or churches, can hold an emotional charge that vibrates through the atmosphere, affecting the mental state of anyone who stays there. Blackwood's house is proof that this energy can be engineered, collected, and transformed into a visible, audible, tangible force. You look down at the street. A few cars are driving by slowly. They are stopping briefly across the street, their occupants pointing up at your house. They aren't terrified, they're admiring it. They're the audience. They're also, in a way, the battery. You look back at the pulsing light and have a chilling realization. The lines of lights are not random. They are following the copper lattice, Blackwood detailed in his drawings. They are forming an intricate pattern, a design that is slowly being filled in, bulb by bulb. They are tracing the invisible skeleton of the house's energy system. You reach out and touch the window pane. It feels cold. But as you watch the lights pulse, you realize that the energy isn't just outside. It's coming from through the wall. You move your hand to the plaster of the interior wall, and this time you can feel the faint warmth and the soft vibration of the music. The house itself is becoming charged. You turn away from the window, the pulse of light imprinted on your vision. You need to sleep, but the idea of lying down with the house breathing around you, the music playing your funeral march, is intolerable. You need a final, desperate attempt at humor. Blackwood's true invention wasn't the seasonal energy siphon, but a really bad noise machine. No wonder he disappeared. He just couldn't stand his own playlist. The actors. Researchers disagree on whether the phenomenon of sleep paralysis, where a person wakes up unable to move and often sees a menacing figure, is purely a neurological glitch involving REM sleep, or if the consistent cultural and historical accounts point to a less understood, shared external phenomenon. For you, right now, the only thing keeping you from sleep paralysis is the constant, loud, rhythmic pulse of the house. You decide the only place you can be relatively safe is back in the attic, in the dark, cold heart of the monster, with Blackwood's journal open. You need to figure out the kill switch. The pulsating, wheezing music is a constant companion as you return to the attic. The volume hasn't increased, but the sheer predictability of the repetitive, tinny waltz, the same 4 bars, over and over, punctuated by the rhythmic expansion and contraction of the lights, is wearing down your sanity like a relentless, tiny hammer. You can feel the energy of the house now, a faint, high-tension static that makes the tiny hairs on your arms stand up. You spread the electrical diagrams and the journal out on the dusty floor, illuminated by the beam of your phone. You're no engineer, but you can understand the basics of Blackwood's intent. The house is a gigantic, closed-loop receiver. It's not taking energy from a direct source. It's harvesting the ambient, low-frequency emotion of the town and converting it into light and sound. The key, you realize, has to be the ferrite core he mentioned, the rectifier he installed in the basement. It's the heart of the system, the part that converts the psychic current into a physical, usable power source. You climb down to the first floor and head for the basement door, a heavy, unpainted slab of wood hidden at the back of the pantry. You pull it open, and the air that rushes out is colder, damper, and carries a strange, coppery smell. You flip the switch for the basement light, but of course, nothing happens. The house is running on its own power, not the grid. You descend the narrow, creaking wooden steps. The beam of your flashlight cuts through the darkness, illuminating a low-ceilinged space with an uneven dirt floor. It's a classic, terrifying basement, stone foundation, exposed pipes, and shadows that seem to move just outside the cone of your light. You have the sudden, horrible thought that this is the kind of place where a person might disappear without a trace. You try to scoff off the fear with a shaky laugh. If I get lost down here, please tell the police I was last seen complaining about the plumbing. You search the space, looking for anything that doesn't look like simple, ancient support beams or plumbing. Then, in a corner bolted to the stone foundation, you find it. It's a wooden box about the size of a microwave with a hinged lid, covered in a patina of decades of basement damp. Thick copper cables, the same kind Blackwood used in the attic, sprout from all sides of the box and disappear into the walls. This is the ferrite core, the structural battery of the spectacle. You try the lid. It's locked. There's a heavy brass padlock that is oxidized with age. You bang on the box, hoping to disrupt the circuit, but the only response is a faint, resonant hum from within. You can feel the energy in it now, a palpable vibration through your fingertips. It feels like a sleeping, mechanized animal. You need a key or a crowbar. You don't have either. You climb back out of the basement, securing the heavy door. You have a target, but you have no means of disabling it. You need a rational explanation for the local authorities, a way to get someone to force the box open. But who would believe you? The electrician, Frank, was your last, best hope for rational intervention, and he fled. The mainstream scary fact about the real-life Amityville horror house comes to mind. Even after the Lutz family fled, claiming demonic possession and paranormal attacks, the house remained standing, a focal point of dark tourism and public fascination, continuing to draw attention and perpetuate its own horrifying legend. The house became the monster. Your house is doing the same thing. It is generating its own horror, and the town is validating it. You decide to drive to the nearest hardware store, an old-fashioned place you'd passed on your first day. You need a crowbar and a heavy-duty padlock cutter. You leave the house, and as you back out of the driveway, you look up. The line of pulsing orange lights has multiplied again. The lights now cover half of the main roof line, reaching toward the back of the house. They are like a glowing infestation covering the structure with an organized, cheerful disease. As you head back, the store is closed. A note on the door says, "Gone for the night. Prepping for the 31st. See you when the fun starts." The whole town is already shutting down, preparing for the apex of Blackwood's terrifying energy harvest. You drive back, defeated. The house is waiting. And now, as you pull back into the driveway, you see the next terrifying phase of the illumination. The lights are no longer just a line. They are mapping something. They have snaked down the side of the house, and on the second floor wall, they have created a perfect glowing outline of a small human figure, arms outstretched. The line is thin, orange, and precise, a horrifying chalk outline made of pure, self-generated light. It is a silhouette of Amelia Blackwood, frozen in the act of reaching out. This brings to mind the obscure or fringe tidbit of ghost lore about shadow people, entities described as dark, vaguely human shapes seen in peripheral vision. The underlying superstition is that these are not ghosts, but beings that exist on a different vibrational plane, occasionally bleeding through into our reality. Your house has gone beyond an ambiguous shadow. It has illuminated an impossible, static memory, giving the memory a specific luminous form. You stare at the glowing outline of the little girl, the lights pulsing to the thin, distorted calliope music. It is a moment of pure, petrifying terror. You manage a final, desperate, dark joke. I knew I should have bought a house with better curb appeal. This place comes with complimentary, light-up evidence of a decades-old crime. You park the car and run inside. You realize the system is nearing completion. Blackwood's journal said the house was the architectural template. The lights are no longer random decorations. They are the living blueprint of the energy system itself. And that outline of the child, that's not just a decoration, it's part of the circuit. The lights are drawing their power from an unknown source that is now so strong, so concentrated, that it makes your teeth ache with a faint, high-frequency thrum. The literal sound of the spectacle's energy charging the house's very structure. You have to break the lock on the box. You have to find a way to silence the house before the pattern is complete. The glowing silhouette of the little girl on the side of your house is a punch to the gut. It's no longer about abstract, unexplained power. It's personal. It's a crime scene illuminated by its own terrible, rhythmic energy. You enter the house, the wheezing calliope music immediately assaulting your ears, and you head straight for the one place you might find a tool, the box of your own belongings marked workshop. You tear into the box, spilling wrenches, screwdrivers, and various bits of hardware across the dusty kitchen floor. You find what you're looking for, a heavy-duty, long-handled pair of bolt cutters. Ironically, tools you brought for potential landscaping work. You grab them, the cool steel, a comforting weight in your hand, a physical object of rational destruction. You descend into the basement again, the flashlight beam dancing nervously across the dirt floor. The music is muted down here, absorbed by the earth and stone, replaced by the faint, coppery hum of the main power box. The air is still cold and damp, but now it feels charged, like the air right before a severe thunderstorm. You find the wooden box, Blackwood's ferrite core. You kneel before it, the bolt cutters in your hands. You look closely at the brass padlock. It's old, heavy, and firmly affixed to the hinge. You position the open jaws of the cutter around the padlock's thick shackle. You squeeze. The metal groans, a high-pitched protesting whine, and then, with a sharp, echoing crack, the shackle snaps. The padlock falls to the dirt with a thud, and you toss the broken pieces aside. You've breached the spectacle's heart. You throw open the lid of the wooden box. Inside, it's a chaotic mess of wiring, but dominated by a single, dark, oddly shaped block of something metallic, the ferrite core. Wires from the walls, ceiling, and floor are all meticulously soldered to terminals on the central block. The block itself is pulsating with a barely visible, low-level blue-white light, and the humming sound is coming directly from it. You can feel the charge in the air, thick and metallic, making your teeth ache. This is the source. You have to disrupt the circuit. You grab the first thick copper wire you can reach and position the bolt cutters around it. You hesitate. What if disrupting the circuit doesn't stop it, but merely causes a catastrophic feedback loop? What if this sympathetic current is so powerful that breaking the wire causes an explosion? You remember the mainstream scary fact that the crypto sculpture at the CIA headquarters contains an encrypted message that remains only partially solved. The horror is in the known, unknown, the certainty that a secret exists, but the inability to fully decipher it. Blackwood's entire system is a physical cryptos, a terrifying circuit you can't fully understand. You can't wait, you have to cut. You snip the first wire. Snap. The sound is shockingly loud. For a heartbeat, everything goes silent. The low hum stops. You wait, breath held. Then, a second later, the hum returns, exactly the same, only slightly higher in pitch. The pulsing blue-white light on the core dims for a moment, then surges back, brighter than before. You check the severed wire. It's dead, but the core is still running. You realize the core is redundant. It's designed to run on a network, and a single broken wire won't stop it. You need to take the entire core offline. You check Blackwood's journal again, frantic now, scanning for a kill switch. You flip to the final page you read, the one ending mid-sentence, and then you see a small, almost invisible annotation in the bottom margin, written in pencil, "Disrupt the final terminal." The power of the town's gaze is now its only weakness. You look back at the core. There is one terminal labeled Omega that has a heavy braided cable leading out of it and disappearing through a small hole in the foundation wall, clearly leading outside. You recognize this cable from Blackwood's early diagrams. It was the external grounding wire, the sympathy anchor. You position the cutters on the thick cable leading to the Omega terminal. This has to be it. You close the cutters, straining against the heavy metal. Shrunch. The entire house screams. The sound is not the music. It's a deafening, high-pitched electrical shriek that makes your ears ring and your bones vibrate. The blue-white light in the core surges, blindingly bright, and then, with a sound like a wet cough, the light snaps out. Silence floods the basement, a complete, total absence of sound that is more shocking than the noise was. You stand up, heart hammering, staring at the inert, silent core. It's done. You've killed the spectacle. You race upstairs, burst out of the basement, and head for the window. You look out onto the dark roofline, ready for the sweet sight of absolute blackness. But the blackness isn't there. The lights are still on. The full line of orange bulbs still covers the half of the roof, and the little girl's silhouette is still glowing on the wall. They are no longer pulsing. They are steady and blindingly bright, the intensity of their light not diminished by the separate connection, but instead frozen at maximum output. And the music. The music is still playing, but instead of wheezing, it is now clear, sharp, and twice as loud, like the final, horrifying chorus of a mechanical symphony. You gasp, a cold wave of understanding washing over you. Blackwood's system was designed to draw energy from the town's anticipation. By disrupting the core, you didn't turn off the house, you only removed the modulator. You stopped the house from converting the energy into a rhythmic pulse and wheeze. Now, the house is just an open siphon, drawing raw, unregulated power from the entire terrified, anticipating neighborhood. You run to the attic, the music now deafening on the second floor. You look at Blackwood's journal again, flipping pages frantically. You spot a small, barely legible footnote on the Omega terminal diagram. If severed prematurely, the current becomes chaotic and must find a complete circuit to discharge. The house must become fully lit to contain the wild current. You realize what's happening. The house is speeding up the process. It's forcing the completion of the spectacle to protect itself. You try a final, desperate joke, your voice raw with panic. This is what happens when you skip the instructions. I guess chaotic illumination is not covered under the limited warranty. This reminds you of an obscure or fringe tidbit of ghost lore. The belief that wildfire souls are not ghosts tied to a specific location, but pure, unanchored emotional energy that, when focused, can manifest as intense heat or light. By severing the anchor, you've unleashed the wildfire soul of the house. You look out the attic window. Already more lights are appearing, snaking across the final, unlit half of the roof, filling in the remaining empty space in the living blueprint. You can feel the immense pressure of the energy. The air is vibrating, and you can practically hear the copper wires vibrating inside the walls. The house is rushing toward its terrifying total illumination. The house is no longer building the spectacle for an audience. It's building it to survive. The sheer speed of the house's self-decoration is horrifying. It's no longer a slow, insidious creep. It's a frantic rush toward total, catastrophic illumination. You stand in the attic, surrounded by the remnants of Blackwood's obsession, watching the final sections of the spectacle snap into place. Along the roofline, down the edges of the porch, and even around the window frames, the orange bulbs are appearing, one after the other, with machine gun rapidity. They are not being plugged in, they are simply materializing into existence and immediately burning in maximum brightness. The house is literally building itself a protective Faraday cage of light. The music is a non-stop mechanical scream. The cheerful waltz now played at a frantic, impossible tempo, a soundtrack to madness. The sound and the light are a unified physical force that presses down on you, a dizzying combination that makes it difficult to think. You stumble back from the window, grabbing Blackwood's journal again. You need to find the core purpose of this thing, not just how it works, but why it was built. You turn to the final unpublished pages of the journal, the ones written in a hand that grows increasingly agitated and messy. Here, Blackwood drops the technical jargon and reveals his true dark intention, the spirit of the circuit. He writes, "The town's fear is not enough. The anticipation is a vessel, but the vessel must be filled with a true, focused spark. The house, when fully lit and resonating with the frequency of terror, will not simply draw the energy of the town, it will draw the attention of the veil itself." He believed that the house, at its peak, would act as a kind of physical bridge, a glowing seasonal lure for entities that exist on the other side. "They come for the light," he scrawls. "They come for the performance, and they require an audience." It dawns on you that the Blackwood's disappearance wasn't a failure of the system, it was the crowning success. They weren't vaporized by the current, they were taken by whatever crossed the bridge the house built. They became the audience Blackwood was trying to summon. You realize the sinister mainstream scary fact at the heart of Blackwood's plan. He wasn't decorating his house, he was building a beacon for the unknown, a giant festive trap. This is reminiscent of the historical fact that many old lighthouses were built on treacherous wave-battered coastlines, and the light they projected was meant to save sailors. Yet many tales persist of the lonely keepers who were driven mad by the isolation and the relentless, hypnotic rhythm of the beam. Blackwood's house is a perverse, dark lighthouse, and its light is meant to lure things in. You look down at the street through the attic window. The town's fascination has become a problem. Cars are pulling over, people are getting out, holding their phones up. The crowd is growing, drawn by the blinding, steady, chaotic illumination. Their anticipation, their shared, excited awe and fear is the fuel. They are all looking at the house, and their collective gaze is exactly the thing that the severed circuit needs to maintain its power. The lights are drawing their energy from the gaze of the town. This reminds you of an obscure or fringe horror tidbit, the superstition of the oculus mollises or the evil eye, the belief that an intense, focused gaze can transmit harm or misfortune. In this case, the collective focused gaze of the town is not transmitting misfortune. It is transmitting power, a raw electrical sustenance that is keeping the house alive and active. You look at the blueprint again. The silhouette of the little girl, Amelia, is a key component. The outline is the perfect, terrifyingly cheerful drawing of a child's silhouette. It's a lure, a symbol. It's what came out of the Blackwood's last holiday. You realize Blackwood's genius in his madness. He engineered a ghost story and then gave the ghost story the power to tell itself. You manage a single, dry, desperate joke, your voice barely audible over the screaming music. "I should have hired a professional decorator. This house has gone from curb appeal to curb stomp appeal in about 24 hours. You realize there is no kill switch, not anymore. You can't stop the energy flow because the source is intangible. It's the will and expectation of the entire community. You can't break the circuit again. The house is already in protective mode, speeding toward total saturation. The only way to stop the spectacle is to turn off the audience. You need to make the house stop being a spectacle." Historians still argue whether the most effective tool in the Spanish Inquisition was the rack and the fire, or the slow, methodical use of psychological terror and public accusation. The house is employing both, the chaotic physical terror of the lights and the psychological torment of the relentless, cheerful music. You look at the clock on your phone. It's late on October 30th. Tomorrow is the 31st. The high tide of the sympathetic current. The day the house will be completely filled. The day the bridge will open. You have less than 24 hours. You know you can't fight the house's power. You can only fight the house's purpose. Blackwood wanted a beacon. You need to make it a fortress. You need to close the house off physically from the town. You need to block the external view to make the house invisible to the collective gaze and starve the spectacle of its fuel. You head back downstairs, the music screaming in your ears, towards the first floor where the biggest windows face the biggest audience. You need to cut the spectacle off from its life support. The house is now a single, throbbing, orange-hot entity. Every window pane, every roof line, every gutter is traced in the brilliant static light. The illumination is so total that you can walk from room to room without your flashlight. The orange glow bleeds through the walls and the ceiling, giving the entire interior a sickly, jaundiced hue. It's early morning on October 31st. The light and the mechanical scream of the calliope music are a constant physical headache, a white noise of terror. You spent the night trying to find a way to block the view from the street. You pulled down every curtain you could find, but the house has massive windows, and the old, faded drapes are thin. You even found a stack of old blankets in a hall closet and tacked them up with great difficulty over the largest windows in the living room. But the bright, chaotic energy of the house simply shines through the thin fabric, turning the blankets into glowing orange squares. The house is a light source of impossible intensity, and you can't dim it. You look out one of the narrow, unblocked side windows. The town has officially begun its holiday. Children in costumes are already visible in the distance, running along sidewalks, the excited chatter of their voices faintly audible, even over the house's deafening internal music. The foot traffic is increasing. The audience is assembling. You realize the spectacle has reached its terrible zenith. The lights are everywhere. The full architectural template Blackwood drew in his schematics is complete. You walk through the house one last time, an inspection of the completed circuit. The glowing silhouette of Amelia Blackwood is still on the side of the house, perfectly rendered, its light brighter than any other spot. But as you watch it, you notice one final subtle detail that makes your stomach clench. The light bulbs that form the girl's outstretched hand are not static. They are subtly and slowly rotating their color, from orange to a faint, pale, spectral green, before snapping back to orange. They are warming up for the main show. You think of the mainstream scary fact about the original Poltergeist film curse, the persistent urban legend that the film itself was cursed due to the use of real human skeletons as props, which was followed by a string of tragic, real-life deaths of the young cast members. The house, like the film, is a vessel that has mixed the truly dark with the artificially cheerful, and the result is a dangerous, self-sustaining nightmare that feeds on its own reputation. You retreat to the foyer, the air thick with the metallic scent of static and the cloying smell of old, dried flowers. The front door is solid, heavy oak. It is currently locked, bolted, and barricaded with a heavy moving box. You stand there, leaning against the cold wall, trying to control your breathing. You are trapped inside a living, screaming, illuminated nightmare, and you can only wait for midnight. The afternoon drags on in a state of hyper-alertness. The music is a constant, grating presence. Around 5:30 p.m., as the sun begins to set, the trick-or-treaters begin to arrive in earnest. You can hear their voices outside, the excited cries and laughter of children. They stop at every other house, receiving candy and admiration for their costumes. But as they approach the Blackwood place, the mood changes. The town respects the spectacle, but they also fear it. You hear the parents' quiet words. "Don't go near that one, Annie. Just cross the street." The children follow suit. They don't walk onto your lawn. They avoid your sidewalk, crossing the street to walk on the opposite pavement, their eyes glued to the house, a mixture of awe and profound instinctual fear on their little faces. You realize this is the final, terrifying paradox of the spectacle. The town is fueling the house with its collective gaze, but they are also keeping a healthy, superstitious distance. They are the audience, but they are also smart enough to stay out of the trap. They are looking at the house, but they are refusing its open invitation. This is the fringe horror tidbit of the threshold fear, the old superstition that a malevolent entity's power is contained within the boundaries of its dwelling, and that simply stepping across the threshold is the act that subjects you to its power. The children and the parents instinctively understand this, staying on the municipal pavement, keeping the house as a powerful, terrifying object, but not a direct threat. They are looking, and by looking, they are feeding it. The music suddenly surges, the mechanical waltz skipping a beat, then roaring back at an even higher tinny pitch. You look toward the main window of the living room. The lights, all the lights, every single bulb on the exterior of the house, suddenly flicker once, like a vast electrical heart skipping a beat, and then the house erupts. The entire system, which was static and steady, is now a blinding, chaotic strobe. The lights aren't just on. They are going on and off at an impossible speed, flickering between blinding brightness and total blackness, a visual assault that turns the exterior of the house into a vibrating orange blur. The intensity is so overwhelming that you can see the light bleeding through the gaps in the door frame, painting the entire foyer in a strobing, epileptic light show of seasonal terror. And with that violent surge, the final component of the spectacle is activated. The heavy oak front door, which you personally locked, bolted, and barricaded with a moving box, doesn't just unlock. It swings open inward with a deep, dramatic whoosh of air, throwing the heavy box backward onto the floor with a crash. It stays open, revealing the dark street, the bobbing lights of the distant crowd, and the blindingly strobing facade. The house, now completely lit and screaming its music, has formally extended its open invitation. You stand alone in the foyer, facing the gaping dark maw of the doorway, framed by the chaotic, strobing light. Researchers disagree on whether the human preference for rhythm and pattern is a deeply rooted evolutionary trait tied to survival, or a learned cultural preference. The house has just broken every pattern, every rhythm, and every logical expectation you had. You try to find a final, futile joke, but your throat is dry. All you can manage is a whispered thought, "I have to close the door." The front door is a solid, black rectangle of negative space in the frenetic, strobing orange illumination. It's an impossible invitation, a deliberate theatrical gesture from the house itself. The mechanical scream of the music pours out onto the street, where the crowd of trick-or-treaters and parents have stopped, now truly terrified. Their collective, silent shock is another surge of power for the house. You can feel the energy radiating from the open doorway, a cold draft despite the electrical heat. You know you have to close it. Not just for your own safety, but to break the line of sight, to stop the town's gaze from feeding the chaotic current. You take a hesitant step toward the open door, and then another. Each step is an act of defiance against the house's will. As you get closer, the strobing light reveals the street outside in terrifying, jerky snapshots, the dark trees, the frozen expressions of the people across the street, the sidewalk empty but clearly visible. The music is an auditory wall of sound that vibrates your chest cavity. You reach the threshold and you look outside. No one is coming closer. They are all standing still, a tableau of fear and awe. Their gaze is 100 bright threads of attention, all leading directly into your open door. You can feel the energy of the gaze on your skin, a prickling sensation like a million tiny needles. You lean out and grab the heavy oak door. It is strangely warm to the touch. You pull, putting your full weight into it. The door doesn't budge. You pull again, harder, straining your muscles, but the door remains fixed, an insurmountable barrier of solid, unmoving wood. It's not just heavy, it's being held open. You look down at the floor, expecting to see a latch or a mechanism, but there's nothing. The house is keeping the door open with its sheer, overwhelming will. It wants the audience to look. It wants the open circuit. You pull one more time, a desperate, futile tug, and then you step back, defeated. The house, sensing your failure, unleashes its next terrifying move. The music suddenly changes. The frantic, screaming waltz abruptly stops, replaced by a deafening, bass-heavy thump-thump that vibrates the floorboards. It's a rhythmic, deep beat, a sound that feels primeval and impossible, played at maximum volume, and the lights respond. The chaotic strobe on the exterior shifts into a new pattern. All the orange lights now flash in perfect, syncopated time with the thump-thump-thump. The house is beating like a colossal electronic drum. The new rhythm is a demand, an insistence. The lights and the beat are now leading toward a single focal point, the open doorway. The entire house is now an arrow, pointing to the street and back. The open invitation is now a physical force drawing you out. You look out at the audience again. The people are shuffling back further now, truly frightened by the sudden, aggressive shift in the spectacle. They are retreating, breaking the circuit of the gaze. The house is losing its fuel. You realize the meaning of Blackwood's final scribbled note. The power of the town's gaze is now its only weakness. The house can't withstand the lack of attention. It is in a frantic, terrifying death throw, trying to force the audience to stay and watch. The open door, the rhythmic pulse, the blinding light. It's all a desperate final act to maintain the focus. This makes you think of the mainstream scary fact about the Bell Witch, a 19th century poltergeist from Tennessee. The creature's defining characteristic was its ability to communicate directly, to scream, sing, and interact with the family it haunted. The true horror wasn't the physical harm it inflicted, but the way it demanded attention, inserting itself into the family's life and becoming the central, uncontrollable figure of their existence. Your house is demanding attention in the same way, but on a grander architectural scale. You step back into the foyer, looking at the entire vast space, lit with the pulsing orange-red light. The thump is so loud it's hard to hear your own thoughts. You remember the glowing silhouette of Amelia on the side of the house, the light bulbs in her hand slowly rotating from orange to pale green. You run back to the side window, ignoring the deafening music. You look at the silhouette. The color rotation is faster now. Orange, green, in a sickening rhythmic flash. And then, as the house beats its colossal drum, the silhouette of the little girl steps out of the light. The bulbs themselves do not move. But within the perfect orange outline, a shadow, a dark, perfectly human shape, like a hole cut out of the light, separates from the wall and moves down the side of the house. It's the size and shape of a small child, a silhouette made of pure darkness, detaching from its luminous frame and sliding down the wall toward the lawn. It is the final element of the spectacle, the audience Blackwood wanted to bring in, now being forced out. This is the obscure or fringe tidbit of the fetch ghost, the entity that takes a physical form to lure its victim. But this isn't a fetch ghost. It's a shadow person made manifest by the extreme, localized energy, the pure darkness of a memory given life by 1,000,000 watts of chaotic, self-generated light. The shadow of Amelia reaches the lawn, and it turns, facing the open front door. The music and the beat are leading it. The shadow begins to glide, silently and impossibly, toward the open doorway, toward you. You realize with a sickening jolt that the house isn't performing for the audience anymore. It's using the last of its external fuel to push its creation, the shadow of the girl it consumed, to you. The house isn't waiting for the audience to enter its trap. It's bringing the main attraction to the new homeowner. You are the new audience. The shadow of the child glides across the lawn with terrifying speed and silence, a complete nullification of the frenetic noise and light erupting from the house. It's a silhouette of pure absorbing blackness, and it's heading for the wide open maw of the front door. The house's rhythmic thump seems to pound out the seconds until its arrival. You are standing directly in the doorway, caught between the screaming, strobing house and the silent, terrifying entity it has extruded. You finally understand the ultimate, horrifying goal of the spectacle. It's not a decoration, it's a transfer point. Elias Blackwood engineered the house to harvest the energy of Halloween and manifest the thing that took his family. And you, the new owner, are the necessary recipient. The house is putting on a show for the town, but it's bringing the main attraction to you. The shadow reaches the top of the porch stairs. It is completely, absolutely dark, an area of total visual absence in the blinding orange light. You can see the edges of the porch boards right up to the shadow, and then nothing, just a perfectly formed, child-sized cutout of light. You step back instinctively, taking one desperate, stumbling step into the foyer, away from the threshold. As the shadow crosses the threshold, the noise and light inside the house intensifies to a level you thought impossible. The calliope music becomes a continuous, high-pitched whine, and the strobing light turns the world into a series of jagged, silent orange and black flashes. The house is celebrating. It has delivered its prize. The shadow is inside the foyer now. It moves slowly, gliding across the floor toward the main staircase. It doesn't look at you. It moves with a single, clear, programmed purpose. It is going back to the source. It is going home. You realize the spectacle's purpose is complete. The house needed to manifest the memory, the shadow of the lost child, and it needed to bring that shadow back inside to complete the circuit. The shadow is not a ghost of fear. It's the final piece of the puzzle, the ultimate sacrifice the house made to achieve its terrifying sentience. The house has consumed the Blackwoods and then forced their memory to become a physical part of its being. You whisper a final, dry, desperate joke, your voice hoarse in the blinding noise. I knew I should have checked the inspection report for inclusion of manifested shadow peoples before signing the papers. They really nickel and dime you with those closing costs. The shadow reaches the foot of the grand staircase and pauses for a brief, perfect second. Then it begins to ascend the stairs, silently climbing toward the second floor, toward the attic, toward the raw, exposed energy of the disconnected core you left in the basement. This all reminds you of the mainstream scary fact about the Dybbuk box, a wine cabinet said to be haunted by a malevolent possessing spirit in Jewish folklore. The true fear is not in the object itself, but in the story and the belief it generates, leading to a host of disturbing subsequent real-life events experienced by its owners. The house is a colossal Dybbuk box, and the shadow is the entity that has just been released and then immediately recalled. You look out the open front door again. The crowd is thinning. The extreme chaotic illumination has scared them off. The town's gaze is breaking, and you can feel the energy of the house begin to diminish slowly. You know you have to get to the shadow before it reaches the attic. You start to ascend the stairs, the blinding strobe light making every step an act of faith. The shadow is only a few steps ahead of you, a perfect dark contrast to the screaming orange hothouse. As you climb, you suddenly feel a strong wave of emotion wash over you. A crushing, overwhelming sense of abandonment and cold, existential loneliness. It's not your emotion. It's the emotion of the shadow, the concentrated essence of Amelia Blackwood's final moment, transferred to the air by the chaotic current. This sensation is the obscure or fringe horror tidbit of the emotional residue theory in parapsychology, the idea that intensely traumatic events can imprint an emotional charge onto a physical location, and that certain individuals are sensitive enough to pick up the memory of the emotion. You are picking up the memory of Amelia's terror. You follow the shadow up, reaching the second-floor landing. The music is an unbearable high-frequency squeal now, like metal tearing. You see the shadow turn toward the attic access door. It pauses again, then begins to glide up the rickety, unlit wooden stairs. You know that once it reaches the attic, the circuit will be complete, the chaotic current will discharge, and you don't know what the house will do next. You realize the house's grand performance, the spectacle, was never for the town. It was the necessary ritual to bring the little girl's dark memory back into its structure, to anchor its sentience. You charge up the final, narrow flight of stairs, ignoring the burning light and the screaming music. You reach the attic doorway, and you look in. The shadow has reached the center of the attic floor, right where you found Blackwood's trunks. It stops and looks up, toward the peak of the roof, the single attic window. And then, slowly, the dark, perfect silhouette begins to dissolve. It is not a violent action, but a slow, silent melting. The darkness seeps down into the dusty floorboards, vanishing without a trace. The house has reabsorbed its own creation. The music cuts out instantly. Completely. The high-pitched shriek dies on a single high vibrating note, and the lights, all of them, everywhere, the entire blinding, self-generated orange tapestry, all short-circuit into absolute, deafening darkness. The silence is the loudest thing you have ever experienced. It is total, absolute, and immediate, a perfect vacuum that replaces the screaming light and the deafening music. The darkness is equally absolute, a crushing, heavy void that the windows cannot penetrate. You stand frozen in the attic doorway, enveloped in a blackness that feels less like the absence of light and more like a physical presence. You fumble for your phone, your hand shaking, and you manage to turn on the flashlight. The narrow beam cuts through the gloom, illuminating the center of the attic floor where the shadow had just vanished. There is nothing there, just dust and the scattered remnants of Blackwood's mania. The silence is profound, a deep, listening quiet. You realize it is midnight, November 1st. The precise moment the town's collective energy would have reached its 0 point. The spectacle, in its final frantic, chaotic act, completed its purpose, reabsorbed its manifested shadow, and then, having spent its entire reservoir of borrowed energy, performed a final, massive short circuit into absolute dormancy. You walk through the dark, silent house. You walk down the narrow attic stairs, then down the main staircase. The air is still charged, but the feeling is different now, like a battery that has been completely drained. The metallic taste in your mouth is gone. You reach the foyer, and the front door, which was held open by the house's will, has now slowly, silently swung shut. It is not locked or bolted, but it is closed, a symbol of the house's return to silence. You walk over and try the door. It opens easily now. You step out onto the porch and look up. The house is dark, completely, utterly dark. No lights, no glow, no stray flicker. Just the deep, aggressive black of an old, sleeping Victorian house. The only illumination is the weak, yellow glow of the streetlights reflecting off the dew-damp pavement. The street is empty. The audience is gone. The stroke of midnight has erased the spectacle and the crowd. You walk to the side of the house and shine your light on the wall where Amelia's glowing silhouette had been. The orange light bulbs are still physically present, screwed tightly into the thin plastic mountings. But they are completely dark, their glass lifeless and cold. The copper wires dangle, severed from the core, now just dead strands of metal. The architectural template is still there, but the life is completely gone. You remember the mainstream scary fact about the Mothman prophecies in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The sighting of the strange creature and the subsequent collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967 were linked by many locals as a single, terrifying chain of events. The fear and the disaster were inseparable, and the story became a collective trauma that the town still talks about. Your house's spectacle was a similar event, a manifestation of the town's collective fear, which had just completed its cycle and collapsed into silence. You go back inside, closing the door softly. You walk to the kitchen and check the basement door. It's still closed. You don't dare open it, but you know the inert, silent ferrite core is down there, completely drained. You are exhausted, mentally and physically. You sit on the cold floor of the foyer, leaning against the main staircase. You know the house is dormant, but you feel its patient energy, a deep structural quiet that is waiting for the next cycle. You realize that Blackwood didn't create a temporary show. He created an annual ritual. The spectacle will happen again. This realization is anchored by the obscure or fringe horror tidbit of the witch's mark, the superstition that a mark left on a home or person by a malevolent entity, no matter how small, becomes a permanent, identifiable point of weakness or possession. The copper wiring is the witch's mark on this house, a permanent self-installed vulnerability that will be activated every time the town's seasonal dread reaches its peak. You look around the silent, dark foyer. You survive the show. You survive the audience. You survive the shadow. You are the only person to have experienced the entire spectacle from the inside and lived. Researchers disagree on whether the phenomenon of collective delusion, where a large group of people shares a mistaken belief or perception, is a purely social or psychological event, or if underlying unexplainable environmental factors can trigger it. The spectacle was a beautiful, terrifying collective delusion, powered by the entire town. Now it is ended, and you are left with the cold, hard, rational facts of a silent, damaged house. You manage a final, tired, dark joke into the silence. Well, that was a spectacular electric bill. I guess I'll have to put a note in the budget for annual exorcism and surge protection. You need to sleep. You need to sleep in the dark, silent house that is now a repository of a completely spent, yet utterly real terror. The house is dormant, but you feel its patient energy, its structural will, waiting for the days to count down again. You know that next year the town's gaze will start to gather, and the lights will begin to appear again, and you will be here to watch it. You are no longer just the owner. You are the keeper of the spectacle. You manage to pull yourself up from the cold floor, your body aching with the exhaustion of fighting a power source that doesn't exist. The house is a hollow shell now, completely inert, a colossal, empty costume after the Halloween party. You walk through the dark, silent rooms with a strange sense of proprietary calmness. You are the sole survivor and the keeper of the secret. The house tried to use you as the final audience for its terrifying performance, and you watched the entire spectacle to its illogical conclusion. You ascend the stairs to the master bedroom, the floorboards silent under your feet, the absence of the calliope music leaving an unnerving ringing in your ears. You don't bother with the power. You know it won't work. You find your sleeping bag and drop onto it, too tired to even climb into it fully. Before you allow yourself to surrender to sleep, you are drawn one last time to the attic. You need to see the remnants of Blackwood's obsession one last time, to feel the cold comfort of the house's dormancy. You climb the creaking attic stairs, your flashlight beam moving across the dust. You reach the center of the room, near the old trunks. Blackwood's journal is still lying open on the floor, the final scribbled mid-sentence entry staring up at you. The energy surge is, the paper is cold. You gather the journal, the thick electrical schematics, and the remnants of the broken padlock. You will burn the diagrams. You will keep the journal. You need the instructions for the next time the house begins to dream. As you turn to leave, your light catches something small and new on the dusty floor, right where the shadow of Amelia had dissipated. It is a tiny, hardcover object, sitting next to the empty trunk. You walk over and pick it up. It's a journal, exactly the same size and binding as Elias Blackwood's, but this one is pristine. The leather is new, the pages are crisp, and the entire volume is completely blank. It's an empty book, waiting to be filled. The house is dormant, but you feel its patient energy, and you have just found a new, blank journal waiting for your own notes. The sudden, impossible appearance of the blank journal is the final, chilling gift from the house, a message from the now silent spectacle. The house is waiting for the next keeper, the next architect of its power. It is waiting for you to chronicle the next season, the next ritual, the next vanishing. This ties into the mainstream scary fact about the phantom hitchhiker, a classic urban legend where a ghostly figure, often a young woman, is picked up on a remote road only to vanish from the car before reaching her destination, leaving a chilling message or a physical object behind. The object is always proof of the impossible encounter. Your blank journal is your proof. You realize that Elias Blackwood didn't vanish. He simply became the first chapter of the house's new story. He documented the birth of the spectacle, and the house consumed him and his family for the glorious completion of that first terrifying volume. Now, the house is giving you the pen. You clutch the two journals, the old filled one and the new empty one. You walk out of the attic, closing the heavy bolted door behind you. You have sealed the secret. You return to your room. You slide under the blankets, the coldness of the house seeping into the fabric. You close your eyes, the retinal burn of the strobing orange light still visible against the inside of your eyelids. You are safe, for now. You recall the obscure or fringe horror tidbit that some occult practices believe a person who is intentionally haunted for a long period can develop a kind of symbiotic relationship with the entity, becoming either its keeper or its replacement. You are now the keeper, a human anchor for the house's terrifying seasonal sentience. You feel a profound final weariness, but not a terror that screams, only a deep, resigned ache. You try to anchor yourself in reality, in logic. Researchers disagree on whether déjà vu is a minor neurological misfiring in the temporal lobes, or a glimpse into a parallel timeline where a similar event has already occurred. You know, with certainty, that you have not just lived an event, but that you are scheduled to live it again. You hold the new blank journal in your hand. The final dark joke is on you. Well, I guess I'll have to work on my writing. I wouldn't want the house to get bored and try to manifest my credit card debt next year. You let the blank journal fall to the floor. You turn on your side, facing the blank wall. The house is completely silent. It is waiting, and so are you. The quiet is settling now, isn't it? The deep, post-midnight quiet of a November morning. All the energy has been spent, drawn away by the turning of the calendar and the collective sigh of a town that can finally, briefly, rest. Feel the darkness around you. It's not menacing anymore, not active. It's just a soft, heavy blanket, a profound silence that allows you to hear the subtle, rhythmic sound of your own heart. The old house is just wood and plaster again, its frantic electrical spirit pulled back into the deepest recesses of the stone and dirt, waiting for the next turn of the year. Let the lingering images fade, the impossible orange light, the perfect black silhouette, the tinny mechanical scream of the music. Those were all just noise, just energy. Now, all that remains is the simple, cold structure. Close your eyes. Let the weariness of the night, the sheer weight of what you've seen and endured, pull you down. The air is cool, and you can hear the faint, low hum of your own ventilation, the one you turned on before the story began. That's a real sound. That's a safe sound. There's nothing left to fear tonight. The house is asleep. The shadow is gone, and the calendar has turned a page, buying you a full year of peaceful, quiet darkness. Let your muscles soften. Let your breathing slow. You are safe. You are tired. You are home. Your house is just a house. For now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, True Scary Stories. Where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it in your country? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love seeing how far these stories travel. Have you shared my channel with your friends yet, or are you keeping these whispers all to yourself? It's all right. Some secrets are best kept in the dark. Tonight we're going somewhere special. Imagine a town just like yours, nestled in the fold of a gentle valley. And on the tallest hill overlooking that town, there's a building. A skeleton of a place, its windows like vacant eyes. This is St. Jude's Hospital. Closed for decades, it stands like a monument to forgotten pain. A place the locals only talk about in hushed tones, trading stories of shadows that move from window to window, of soft weeping carried on the wind. But there's one story, one detail, that transforms the place from a simple ruin into a genuine mystery. For as long as anyone can remember, a single window on the third floor of the abandoned West Wing has a light on, not every night, but often enough. A soft, steady, pale yellow glow in a building that has been disconnected from the power grid for 40 years. You've seen it yourself, haven't you? Driving home late at night, your eyes are drawn up to Hawthorne Hill, past the silhouettes of the skeletal trees to that solitary, defiant light. It calls to you, a question mark hanging in the darkness. Tonight, you're going to find the answer. You've packed a powerful flashlight, a backup, and a bottle of water. Sensible, but this is the kind of story where sensible preparations feel a little optimistic. After all, you probably won't survive this, but at least you'll be hydrated. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I'm curious. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that low, unsettling hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You park your car half a mile down the hill, tucked away in a small, gravel-paved scenic overlook that has been reclaimed by weeds. The walk up the winding access road is steep, and the air grows colder, thinner as you ascend. The moon is a sliver tonight, offering little help, but the stars are brilliant, scattered across the inky black like spilled salt. You keep your flashlight off, letting your eyes adjust. Up ahead, the silhouette of St. Jude's cuts a jagged hole in the sky, and there it is, the light, third floor, West Wing. It's a sickly, jaundiced yellow, not the clean white light of a modern bulb. It doesn't flicker, it just waits. There are strange lights that have been a part of folklore for centuries. The most famous, of course, are corpse candles or will-o'-the-wisps, those eerie floating lights seen over bogs and graveyards, said to be the souls of the dead or mischievous fae, luring travelers to their doom. This light feels different. It's too steady, too deliberate. It's not leading you anywhere. It's simply marking a destination. You reach the rusted chain-link fence that rings the property. A faded sign, its letters peeling like sunburned skin, reads, "No trespassing, property of the Archdiocese." Danger. You almost laugh. If the Archdiocese wanted to keep people out, they should have invested in a better fence. A section near a great gnarled oak tree has been crushed, either by a falling branch or, more likely, by generations of curious teenagers. You step over the crumpled metal, your boots crunching on dead leaves and broken glass. You're on the grounds now. The air changes instantly. The gentle night breeze seems to die, and the ambient sounds of crickets and distant traffic fade into a thick, profound silence. It's as if you've passed through a curtain into another place. An old piece of ghost lore comes to mind. A fringe superstition that a single, unexplained light burning in a derelict building is an anchor for a spirit that refuses to move on. A soul so stubborn or so terrified, it generates its own illumination to keep the darkness at bay. The main entrance is a grand, Gothic archway, but the heavy oak doors are chained and padlocked. You trace the building's perimeter, your hand trailing along the cold, grimy brickwork. The lower windows are all boarded up, thick sheets of plywood secured from the inside. It seems the Archdiocese was serious about keeping people out, or perhaps keeping something in. You make your way around the back, towards the old service and delivery area. Here, the decay is more pronounced. An old loading bay is choked with weeds, its metal door hanging half off its tracks like a broken jaw. And next to it, a smaller service door made of steel stands slightly ajar. It's an invitation. Rust has eaten away at the lock mechanism, and the door has settled into the frame at a slight angle, leaving a gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. It's almost too perfect. A convenient entry point in a building otherwise sealed tight. The kind of thing that makes you wonder if you're being led. Historians still argue whether the concept of the genius loci, or the protective spirit of a place, originated as a genuine belief in localized deities or simply as a personification of a community's emotional connection to a landmark. Standing here, in the oppressive silence of St. Jude's, you feel that either explanation is equally unsettling. The spirit of this place does not feel protective, it feels hungry. Taking a deep breath, you squeeze through the gap. The screech of metal on the concrete floor is obscenely loud in the stillness. And then you are inside. The darkness is absolute. It's a physical presence, heavy and smelling of dust, damp plaster, and something else, something vaguely medicinal and sweet. The smell of old decay. You click on your flashlight. The beam cuts a sharp white cone through the black, revealing a narrow corridor lined with peeling paint and pipes weeping rust-colored tears. The door swings shut behind you with a deep, definitive thud that echoes down the hall, sealing you in. Well, you think with a dry smile, no turning back now. At least the service is prompt. You are in what looks like a basement utility corridor. The air is thick and cool, and every surface is coated in a fine layer of gray dust that swirls in your flashlight beam like disturbed ghosts. Your footsteps, which were silent on the leaves outside, now crunch and echo with alarming clarity. Broken bits of plaster, shattered tile, and unrecognizable detritus litter the floor. It's like walking on bones. The silence down here is different from the silence outside. It's not just an absence of noise. It feels pressurized, heavy in your ears. You get the sense that you are not alone in this silence, that something else is being quiet with you. You move slowly, cautiously, sweeping your light from side to side. The corridor leads to a set of concrete stairs, slick with a fine, dark mildew. As you ascend, the oppressive basement air begins to thin, replaced by the stale, dry air of the hospital proper. You emerge into a large, institutional kitchen. Giant, stainless steel ovens and prep tables stand like silent, silver tombs. A row of massive mixers, their dough hooks poised like skeletal claws, are covered in cobwebs so thick they look like burial shrouds. On one of the tables, a single, solitary dinner plate sits, perfectly clean, as if waiting for a meal that was never served. It's a jarringly domestic image in this landscape of industrial decay. It makes no sense. You touch the edge of it. The ceramic is cold as ice. You remember reading about the history of places like this. St. Jude started as a sanatorium for tuberculosis patients in the early 20th century before becoming a general hospital, and finally a hospice care facility in its last years. The layers of suffering are baked into its very walls. In the early days of mental asylums, which often shared architectural DNA with hospitals like this, treatments were terrifyingly crude. Hydrotherapy could mean being blasted with high-pressure hoses or submerged in ice water for hours. It wasn't about healing, it was about breaking the patient's spirit. You wonder how many broken spirits still wander these halls. You find a set of swinging doors and push through them into a wider corridor. This is the ground floor. Your goal is the West Wing, 3 stories up. The layout is a confusing labyrinth of hallways, each one identical to the last, painted in that soul-crushing shade of pale, institutional green that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. Doors line the hallway, some closed, some hanging open, revealing rooms filled with overturned beds and shattered furniture. In some old folk traditions, there's a great deal of superstition surrounding thresholds. Crossing the threshold of a home, or in this case a hospital, is a significant act. It is said that malicious spirits often cannot cross a threshold uninvited. The fact that the service door was open for you feels less like luck and more like a carefully extended welcome. You suppose it's too late to RSVP now. Maybe. As you walk, you start to notice the sounds. At first, you dismiss them as the normal groans and sighs of a large, derelict building settling. A faint creak from the floor above, a soft scraping sound from a room down the hall, the whisper of wind finding its way through a broken window pane somewhere far away. But the longer you are inside, the more you realize these sounds have a rhythm to them. They aren't random. It's the building's own unique, decaying heartbeat. A drip of water from a rusted pipe somewhere keeps a steady, maddening rhythm, like a metronome counting down to something. You pass a collapsed section of the ceiling where plaster and wires hang down like the entrails of some great beast. Your light catches something on the wall, a series of small, dark handprints far too low to be an adult's. They look like they were made in soot or dried blood. You choose to believe it's soot. You find the main stairwell, a wide concrete structure with a heavy iron railing. The steps are littered with debris. As you begin to climb, a new sound joins the building's symphony, a soft, metallic rattle. You freeze, turning off your light, and listen in the perfect dark. It's coming from above. It's rhythmic, but not steady. It's the sound of a single wheel with a squeaky bearing, a wheel on a cart, or a gurney. It rolls for a few feet, then stops, rolls, then stops, as if someone is pushing it down a long hallway, pausing every few feet to check on their patient. Researchers disagree on whether the human brain is hardwired to see patterns in random noise, a phenomenon known as audiopareidolia, or if some sounds genuinely carry information beyond our normal sensory perception. As you stand there, heart hammering against your ribs, you don't feel like your brain is creating a pattern. You feel like you are eavesdropping on a routine that has been playing out for decades. You turn your light back on. The beam feels flimsy, inadequate against the sheer weight of the darkness. Deciding that whatever is making that sound is on a higher floor, you continue your ascent, your steps now deliberately soft, trying not to announce your presence to the hospital's other occupants. You're no ghost hunter, but you're pretty sure the first rule of survival is not to interrupt the locals during their nightly rounds. You reach the second floor landing and pause. The squeaking is louder here, seemingly coming from just down the hall. You have a choice: explore this floor, or continue up to the third, towards the light that brought you here. The light is the mission. The squeaky wheel is just a distraction, a very, very creepy distraction. You take the next flight of stairs, telling yourself you're being brave, not cowardly. It's a fine line. You emerge from the stairwell onto the third floor. The air up here is different, drier. The smell of medicinal decay is stronger, laced with a faint, cloying sweetness, like old dried flowers. This floor appears to be the main administrative and reception area. You step into a vast, cavernous lobby, a grand hall of forgotten welcomes. Moonlight struggles through a massive, grime-caked arched window at the far end, casting long, distorted shadows that writhe and twist as you move your flashlight beam across the room. The floor is a mosaic of cracked and missing tiles, and a thick carpet of fallen plaster and pigeon feathers crunches under your boots. In the center of the hall, a circular reception desk lies on its side, its wood warped and splintered. Behind it, hundreds of patient files have spilled from rusted filing cabinets, their pages swollen and stained with water damage, the ink on them bleeding into unreadable Rorschach blots. A grand piano, of all things, sits in one corner, its lid torn off and its keys yellowed like ancient teeth. Someone, long ago, has scratched "Help US" into the dusty wood of its surface. A bit on the nose, you think, but it gets the point across, and then you hear it again, the squeak, 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 squeak. It's closer now, much closer. It's on this floor with you. It's coming from the west wing, the very direction you need to go. You extinguish your light and duck behind the overturned reception desk, peering through a gap in the splintered wood. You hold your breath, listening. The sound is maddeningly clear in the otherwise dead silence of the grand hall. It's the distinct rhythmic squeak of a single unoiled gurney wheel, rolling slowly across a linoleum floor. It moves a few feet, then stops. A soft metallic rattle accompanies it, the sound of a loose side rail. Then it starts again. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It's performing a patrol. You can almost picture it. A nurse in a starched white uniform, her face obscured by shadow, pushing a gurney down the long, dark corridor. But there's no sound of footsteps, no hum of an elevator, just the lonely, insistent squeak of that one wheel. The mortality rates in early 20th century hospitals were astonishingly high. Before the widespread use of antibiotics and sterile procedures, a hospital was often a place you went to die, not to get better. Places like St. Jude's are layered with a sediment of fear and pain. It's no wonder so many stories cling to them. The theory of psychometry, or object memory, suggests that inanimate objects can absorb and retain the emotional energy of events that happen around them. A wedding ring might hold joy, a weapon might hold rage. A hospital gurney, you imagine, would be saturated with a whole spectrum of suffering, terror, agony, and the quiet, final resignation of the dying. Maybe that's what you're hearing. Not a ghost, but an echo, a sound so profound it stained the very air of this place. You wait for what feels like an eternity, crouched in the dark. The squeaking continues its slow, methodical journey down a hallway you can't see. It seems to be moving away from you, deeper into the west wing. You have to follow it. The light is in that direction. Taking a slow, steadying breath, you rise from your hiding spot and switch on your flashlight, keeping the beam pointed at the floor. You feel like a mouse creeping out of its hole while a cat patrols the house. You cross the debris-strewn lobby, your boots making far too much noise. You pass a series of administrative offices, their doors hanging open. Inside, desks are overturned, and heavy black telephones lie half buried in plaster dust, their receivers off the hook as if in the middle of a call that was abruptly cut short. On one wall, a corkboard still has a few notices pinned to it. A flyer for a hospital charity bake sale in 1978, a memo about new parking regulations, a schedule for the nursing staff. One name, Eleanor Vance, is listed for night duty in the West Wing. Every night for the entire month the schedule covers. The ink is faded, but the name is clear. As you reach the entrance to the West Wing corridor, the squeaking stops. The silence that rushes back in is somehow more menacing than the sound it replaced. It feels like a held breath, like a predator that has just noticed it's being stalked. The hallway stretches out before you, a long, dark throat. The floor is tiled in a black and white checkerboard pattern, a classic design that now looks like a pathway into some surreal, nightmarish game. The doors on either side are all closed. You think about the doppelganger myth, the spectral double of a living person. Scholarly debate continues over whether these tales originated from unrecognized neurological conditions that cause out-of-body experiences, or from a more primal, deep-seated fear of our own duality and mortality. Seeing your double was almost always a harbinger of death. You wonder what it means to hear the echo of an action, to hear the ghost of a routine. Is that a warning too? You take your first step into the West Wing, into the profound and waiting silence. The air is colder here. You can feel it on your skin. You feel a bit like you're walking onto a stage, long after the play has ended, but the actors haven't quite left yet. You just hope they don't expect you to know your lines. The West Wing corridor is long and straight, a perfect channel for unseen things to rush towards you in the dark. The beam of your flashlight seems to get swallowed up by the oppressive blackness just 20 feet ahead. Every closed door you pass feels like a judgment, a secret being kept. You can't shake the feeling that as soon as you pass a door, it silently creaks open behind you and something peers out, watching you go. You resist the urge to turn around. Some scary movie rules are worth following, and never look back is definitely in the top 5. About halfway down the hall, you come to a set of double doors with small, wire-meshed windows. Faded, peeling paint above the doors spells out, Payi Ederic Ward. A chill, entirely different from the ambient cold of the hospital, traces its way down your spine. Of all the places in the hospital, the children's ward is always the most emotionally charged. A place of concentrated hope and devastating sorrow. You push one of the doors open. It groans in protest, the sound echoing down the empty hall behind you. The room you enter is large and, at one time, was clearly meant to be cheerful. The walls are painted a pale blue, now stained and peeling to reveal the sickly green underneath. Faded murals of cartoon animals, smiling bears, happy little rabbits, a clumsy-looking giraffe are still visible. Their once joyful painted eyes now seem vacant and sad in your bouncing flashlight beam. The paint is cracked and flaked in such a way that the smiling bear now has a grotesque, jagged scar running down its face. Small, metal-framed beds are scattered around the room, some overturned, some still neatly made but covered in a thick shroud of dust. A rocking horse with one of its rockers broken off sits in the center of the room, tilted at a sad, defeated angle. You sweep your light across the room, and that's when you hear it. It's not the gurney, it's something else. A whisper. So faint, you think you're imagining it. You click off your light and stand perfectly still, straining your ears. There it is again, a soft, sibilant sound, a giggle. It's the sound of a small child, a girl, trying to stifle a laugh while hiding. It's coming from the far corner of the room, near a small closet with its door slightly ajar. Your blood runs cold. Of all the things you might have expected to find in this hospital, the sound of a child playing is somehow the most terrifying. It's so wrong, so out of place. This is where the grim history of societal struggles often intersected with medicine. During the Industrial Revolution, children were forced into brutal labor, leading to widespread illness and injury. Hospitals like this would have seen countless young patients suffering from conditions that are now easily treatable, their short lives ending in wards just like this one. A place designed for healing, yet so often a witness to tragedy. The giggle comes again, a little clearer this time, followed by a whispered word you can just make out. Ready. It's the sound of a game, hide and seek. Another whisper, this time from a different part of the room, behind a fallen cabinet, answers, not yet. You are standing in the middle of a game being played by children who aren't there. Your heart is a frantic drum against your ribs. You feel an almost overwhelming urge to call out, ready or not, here I come, but you bite it back. That seems like a spectacularly bad idea. Who knows what the rules of their game are? There's a fringe belief, an offshoot of Celtic lore, that spirits of children are not the same as adult ghosts. They are said to be more like fae or elemental spirits, mischievous, amoral, and not bound by the same rules of the afterlife. They are drawn to places of strong emotion, and a children's ward is a veritable banquet. They are said to enjoy games, but their idea of playing can be dangerous to the living who stumble into their world. You have definitely stumbled. You slowly, carefully begin to back out of the room. You don't want to be found. As you move, your light drifts across one of the walls, and you see something you missed before. Scratched into the plaster at the child's height are drawings. Not happy pictures of houses and suns, but stick figures. Lots of them. Stick figures lying down in beds. And one tall, shadowy stick figure standing over them. It has no face, but its arms are long, spindly, and end in what look like sharp, jagged fingers. Underneath the drawing, a single word is scrawled in childish handwriting: Stitch. You get the distinct impression Stitch is not one of the hospital staff, or at least not one of the living ones. A soft scraping sound comes from the closet. The door is opening. Wider. You don't wait to see who's coming out. You turn and bolt from the room, pulling the heavy door shut behind you. You don't run, but you walk very, very fast back into the main corridor of the West Wing. As you leave the ward, you hear one last, perfectly clear whisper float through the thick wooden door behind you. It's a little boy's voice this time, full of playful disappointment. You're not playing right. You lean against the wall in the corridor, trying to catch your breath, your light trembling in your hand. You've never felt so unwelcome in your life. It's one thing to explore an empty building. It's another thing entirely to crash a party you definitely weren't invited to, especially when the hosts have been dead for 50 years. You look down the hallway. It's still dark, still silent. The light is still waiting for you. The game of hide and seek is behind you. Whatever is waiting for you at the end of the hall feels infinitely older and less playful. Scholarly debate continues over whether children are more psychically sensitive than adults, their minds not yet conditioned to filter out experiences that don't fit a rational worldview, or if their active imaginations simply make them more prone to misinterpreting mundane stimuli. Right now, you're leaning heavily towards the psychically sensitive explanation. You push yourself off the wall and continue your journey, leaving the children to their endless game. You move further down the West Wing corridor, leaving the pediatric ward and its whispering games behind you. The air seems to get heavier with each step, the silence more profound. You pass a series of what must have been patient rooms. Most are empty, stripped of furniture, but in some, a lone metal bed frame remains, rusting in the damp air. You try not to look into them for too long. The darkness in those rooms feels watchful. You come to a wider area of the hall, where a large U-shaped counter indicates you've found a nurse's station. It's a wreck. Charts and papers are scattered everywhere, creating a kind of papery snowdrift across the floor and counter. A vintage switchboard telephone sits on the desk, its thick black cords tangled like snakes. Several of the lines are unplugged and dangling, as if the operator left in the middle of a call. Your flashlight beam catches the glint of glass on the floor. A small vial, the kind used for injections, is rolled under the desk. Its label is long gone. There's an eerie sense of sudden abandonment here. It's not the slow decay you've seen in the rest of the hospital. This feels different, more personal. It looks like someone left in a hurry. You step behind the counter, your boots crunching on the scattered papers. On the wall, a calendar is still pinned up. It's for October 1979. The last day crossed off is the 23rd. The hospital officially closed in February of 1980. Someone was working here, counting down the days, and then they just stopped. Your light falls on a small, leather-bound diary, half hidden under a pile of patient charts. It feels strangely intimate to pick it up, a violation of someone's privacy, but curiosity gets the better of you. The leather is cool and dry to the touch. You open it. The handwriting inside is a neat, feminine cursive. It's a nurse's personal log. The first several entries are mundane, complaints about long shifts, notes about difficult patients, gossip about doctors. But as you flip closer to the end, the tone changes. The neat cursive becomes a frantic, messy scrawl. The last entry is dated October 23rd, 1979. The same day the calendar stopped, you read it in the tight, focused beam of your flashlight. He's not sleeping again. The patient in 313. He just lies there, staring at the ceiling. The light in his room won't turn off. Maintenance has been twice. They cut the power to the entire wing from the breaker, and it still stayed on. They think I'm crazy. But I see him. He talks in a language I've never heard, but I understand it in my head. He talks about the door. He says the door at the end of the hall isn't a door, it's a lock, and he's the key. Last night, he asked me my name. I didn't tell him. Dr. Michael says it's just dementia, a Sundowners episode, but his eyes, they are so old, so very, very old. When I do my rounds, I see shadows under his door, shadows of things that are too tall to be men. I'm not going back in that room. I'm leaving this note for Eleanor, for the night shift. Don't go in there, no matter what you hear. Just leave the door closed. E-entry ends there. Abruptly. Room 313. The light. You remember the name from the schedule in the lobby. Eleanor Vance, the nurse who was supposed to take over the night shift. The one this final unsent letter was for. You wonder if Eleanor ever got the warning. You suspect not. This story of a nurse and a strange patient brings to mind the chilling true case of Janine Jones, a pediatric nurse in the 1980s who became known as the Angel of Death. She was convicted of murdering one child by injecting them with a powerful muscle relaxant, but she is suspected of being responsible for the deaths of up to 60 infants and children who were in her care. She would induce medical crises in her patients to then save them and receive praise, but her attempts were not always successful. It's a horrifying reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not supernatural, but all too human. You carefully place the diary back where you found it. It feels dangerous, like a cursed object. The letter details a classic case of what could be interpreted as shared psychosis or folie douce, where a delusional belief is transmitted from one individual to another. Researchers still debate the precise mechanisms of this phenomenon, whether it requires a pre-existing vulnerability in the secondary person, or if a charismatic, dominant individual can impose their delusions on almost anyone. Was the nurse succumbing to the patient's madness, or was she witnessing something truly inexplicable? The answer seems to be waiting for you at the end of the hall. There's a strange bit of lore about automatic writing, where a person is said to write things without conscious thought, supposedly channeling a spirit or external intelligence. The degradation of the handwriting in that diary, from neat script to panic scrawl, feels like a darkened version of that. Not a spirit taking over the hand, but the writer's own terror overwhelming her, her mind losing its grip on motor functions, a de-evolution into pure fear. You sweep your light across the nurse's station one last time. You notice a half-eaten sandwich, still in its wax paper wrapper, sitting on the counter. A deep bite has been taken out of it. It's mummified, hard as a rock. The image is so mundane, so human, it's almost more disturbing than the diary. A nurse, in the middle of her lunch break, interrupted by something so terrifying she fled, leaving everything behind. You hope she at least had a decent union. Leaving a sandwich behind feels like a serious workplace grievance. You step away from the station, your mind racing. You now have a room number, 313, the source of the light, the room with the patient who wouldn't sleep. You're no longer just exploring, you're following a story to its final terrifying chapter. Leaving the unsettling time capsule of the nurse's station behind, you continue your long walk down the west wing. The corridor stretches before you like a throat, seemingly endless, an architectural challenge to your courage. Each open doorway you pass is a dark mouth, yawning into a blackness your flashlight can only partially penetrate. You feel a strange pull towards them, a morbid curiosity to see what lies within each forgotten room. But you resist, you have a destination. Room 3D3. The numbers on the doors are your only guide. They are painted in a simple black stencil. 301, 303, 305. The odd numbers are on your left, the even on your right. You pass room 307 and notice the door is ajar. A thin slice of profound darkness is visible. From within, you hear a soft, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. It's the sound of a fingernail tapping on a window pane, a slow, patient, deliberate rhythm. You don't slow down, you don't shine your light inside, you just keep walking. Whatever is in there can keep its own company. You're not looking for new friends tonight. The air in the hallway is getting colder. Not just the damp chill of a derelict building, but a biting, unnatural cold that seems to radiate from the far end of the corridor. It seeps into your jacket, making the hairs on your arms stand on end. You can see your breath now, a small white cloud in your flashlight beam. This phenomenon is a cornerstone of paranormal lore. The idea that spirits or supernatural entities draw thermal energy from their surroundings to manifest, causing a sudden, localized drop in temperature. It's a claim that's notoriously difficult to prove scientifically, but as you walk down this hallway, feeling the warmth being leached out of you, you're not particularly interested in scientific proof. This long, terrifying walk reminds you of the infamous death tunnel at Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky. It was a 500-foot tunnel built to transport the bodies of deceased tuberculosis patients from the hospital to the bottom of the hill, out of sight of the living patients, to keep morale up. Staff would wheel the dead on gurneys down this long, dark chute. It's now considered one of the most haunted places in America, a place where countless people have heard phantom footsteps and disembodied voices. This hallway feels like its own kind of death tunnel, a horizontal version, leading not to the outside world, but deeper into the hospital's diseased heart. You're getting close. The light you saw from the outside must be just around the corner, as this straight corridor doesn't seem to have a window that would face the front of the hospital. There must be a bend up ahead. The sense of anticipation is a tight knot in your stomach. It's a mixture of dread and an almost unbearable curiosity. It's the same impulse that makes people slow down to look at a car crash, the need to see the horror for yourself. There's an obscure superstition, a piece of traveler's folklore, that warns against walking down a long, straight path at night, be it a road or a hallway, without occasionally breaking your stride or looking away. The belief is that such straight paths are spirit roads, and by walking them in a direct, unthinking line, you make yourself